Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call and welcome to the special meeting of the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we're going to begin with our roll call, if you will, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. Trustee Feemster. Here. Trustee Frankel. Here. Trustee Simon Holland. Here. I'm here. Trustee Mayer. Here. Trustee Raymond. Here. Trustee Taylor.
I'm here.
Student Representative Chacon. Here. All 7 of us are here and present.
Thank you very much, and then let the record show that we do have a quorum. We're going to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And leading us today, I'm going to ask Pastor Emeritus from Second Baptist Church, Reverend Webb, to lead us in the pledge. He's an icon and a legend in this community, sir. If you wouldn't mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to begin with public comment, and we'll turn to Ms. Batchelder. Do we have any public comment to begin the meeting?
Just a couple. Taylor Harper.
Welcome, Principal Harper. Thank you for being here. You know you have 3 minutes, ma'am. Let's get that mic on.
Check, check, mic check. All right. I understand I have 3 minutes, correct? Okay. My name is Taylor Harper. I am the principal of Innovations Big Picture High School. I am a school leader that makes the choice to lead schools that have historically been the perfect example of institutionalized inequity. Here's the thing. If schools and systems like that can exist, districts and communities like that exist. Under past leaders, Washoe County School District has been no exception. Changing systems so that they are focused on all kids at all times by all of the humans responsible for them takes a leader that can look under the rug and recognize problems of practice, who can ask difficult questions and will absolutely make people uncomfortable. Educational change agents also listen to the most important human beings, the kids. I've never ever seen student voice championed as much as I've seen it under Tracy Davis's leadership. That makes people uncomfortable too. Sometimes these change agents have to say, no, we are not doing it this way anymore, and it will make people mad. This evaluation draft is a great litmus test. It means change is happening, and people who don't want change are getting uncomfortable. In 2013, I was given the challenge of turning around the district's alternative high school, which at a time had a single-digit graduation rate. How did that happen? It happened because of decades of institutionalized inequity, and that means leaders let it happen. I knew it would take many leaders above me who believed in kids, all kids, to make any sort of change, and that was a frightening concept. Tracy Davis, who was interim superintendent at the time, was one of the few who believed in me. She's been a champion of our school, our scholars, our staff, our families, and of big picture learning since the first day of our journey. She's mentored our scholars, knows every human being in my building by name and face, and has helped us to move mountainous barriers, which have led to double-digit growth in our grad rates over the last few years. This approach comes naturally to Tracy, but it takes 2 sides to form a productive, transparent working relationship, and the innovators were all in. I wonder if people in our district and community know how respected Tracy is by innovative leaders outside of Washoe County School District across our nation and our globe. We have, as a school, visits and connections with school leaders wanting to emulate the work we do for kids, thanks to Tracy Davis. They know her by name, they know her work, they express that they wish they had superintendents as dedicated as her. California, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Idaho, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Jersey, Colorado, Delaware, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Africa, and Israel. Phenomenal educators have uprooted themselves from other states and districts to work at Innovations, and a main motivator was a district with a superintendent who is the real deal, who leads with integrity, honesty, fairness, that is student-focused and above everything else. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Principal Harper. If you care to, you can certainly
I can,
introduce those who are with you.
Introduce the folks that are with me. We have some community members. I know that there are some alumni scholars from Innovations High School out in the wings. We have some current scholars and some of our amazing staff from Innovations Big Picture High School.
Ms. Batchelder?
Layla Woods.
Ms. Woods, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Layla Woods, a big picture scholar at Innovations High School. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of my advisor, Angelique Dunker. A little over a year ago, I left an established tenured teaching position in the Gulf Coast for an opportunity to teach under the leadership of a student-centered, progressive leader named Tracy Davis. Professionally, the decision to move across the country to a new district, a new school, a new administration, a new population was extremely risky. However, I believe that within my core being, that under this leadership, I could really make a difference in the emotional and social education development of a community. My gut wasn't wrong. Putting students first is a statement commonly made in educational leadership, but is rarely practiced with fidelity. Ms. Davis has constantly fought for what's right for students at the expense of policies, financial composition, a very established bureaucracy. Fighting for the good requirements, the tenacity, the creativity, and the vision Ms. Davis has demonstrated in her tenure as a superintendent. The proof is in the pudding: graduation rates. Teachers work harder for leaders that they respect. Students work harder for teachers and administration that make them feel appreciated, heard, and loved. This is what the superintendent has created: a culture of learning surrounded by gratitude and respect. She deserves our gratitude and respect. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Woods.
John O'Brien.
Mr. O'Brien, welcome. Thank you for being here, sir. You'll have 3 minutes right there.
Okay.
Thank you, and hello. My name is Jonathan O'Brien. I'm a licensed administrator and teacher in Nevada. I opened the El Dorado Freshman Preparatory Academy and the Southwest Career and Technical Academy in Southern Nevada. These schools experienced 100% graduation rates, even with the proficiency exam requirements in place. We were the only Apple Distinguished School in the state and consistently ranked in the top 5 schools in our state. I believe I know what success looks like in education. I worked very closely with that district's leaders in order to accomplish this, and it was good. We operated under the belief that nothing worth having is easy, and we put our kids first in all of our decisions. And then there was a change. We stopped talking about kids. We became so overwhelmed and inundated with social media perspectives and single-person comments that we truly did lose our way. We lost our focus, and I'm very sad to report we stopped making decisions for kids. And with that change, it became time for me to leave. Now listen, any parent will tell you that the best choices for our children are often the tougher, more difficult choices, sometimes unpopular choices. And I came to Washoe County School District because Tracy Davis makes tough choices that put kids first. Tracy Davis has a contagious passion for young people and their educators that cannot be dismissed. Tracy Davis has given me the ability to fulfill the purpose of my life while preparing young people to be successful in theirs. Working under Tracy isn't a job. It's not about a paycheck. It's not about health insurance or passing time. So what is this about? This is about being a part of something bigger than ourselves. This is about doing what is right, not what is easy. This is about the big picture and what matters most to the people of Washoe County. This is about every child, by name and face, to graduation. This is about Tracy Davis. and I challenge all of us together to continue making the best decision for the children of our school district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Michael Dermody.
Mr. Dermody? We don't see him. Perhaps, JJ, let's come back to him. Ms. Batchelder, if you would. Thank you.
Dr. Barbara McClurry.
Dr. McCrory?
I think she's coming from the other room.
Okay. If you will, Ms. Batchelder, what we'll do is call the name and then let's say who's next so that if they are in the other room, they can position themselves accordingly.
You bet. Okay. So I have Richard J. However, Trustee Raymond is going to read his statement.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Batchelder. Trustee Raymond?
So Richard J. emailed me this and asked if I would read it, and I'm going to do so. According to the contract, Section 8, a mid-year evaluation is needed to determine if any deficiencies exist and address them. Did Tracy receive a mid-year evaluation? If no, why? Was she made aware of any deficiencies prior to the evaluation? Heath Morrison had quarterly reviews during his time with WCSD. Why have we abandoned that practice? Are the newly elected trustees who have less than 1 year on the board truly qualified to give a complete and objective full-year evaluation? No disrespect intended, just a valid question. What was her evaluation last year and what specific areas dropped since then? Using the information below, what was declined? If measurable statistics have risen and her evaluation ratings dropped, what's different? A new board? Question mark. Were any deficiencies ever brought to the superintendent attendant's attention prior to this evaluation? If not, why? The board is responsible for the superintendent/CEO of the district. What data can be presented to support this low rating? Can it be quantified, or is it more personal feeling? Personal feeling cannot be used in any evaluation. Looking at the rubric for evaluation is rather opinionated and lacking an element of hardcore facts and figures. Following the mission statement, how do you assign a 1 through 4 score for that versus increasing graduation rates? Any mid-year and yearly evaluation should be based on hardcore, verifiable data. It is very clear that Trustee 2 has an axe to grind. Looking at the other trustee numbers and comparing them to Trustee 2, there is a personal agenda here. How can you assign a 1 through 4 numeric number for the following, in quotation marks, acknowledges failures and celebrates success, end quotation. Below certainly celebrates success. How can you hold her accountable for funding from the state of Nevada? What control does she have here? Are you holding her accountable for uncontrollable issues? Budget is straightforward. You can only spend the money you have. Technically, isn't the board responsible for the budget? Was she given any credit for WC1? Oops. Which could not have happened without the support of the superintendent. Based on this information, it is my personal feeling we should postpone this evaluation. The data is too vague and the variation have a very wide margin. The evaluation, go back to the original rubric from several years ago designed by Don McAdams. Also, this data should be postponed due to no mid-year review for the superintendent. If we use the data below, the rating would be 4, and the data he provided is the grad rates. Sorry, I didn't finish.
Thank you, Trustee Raymond. I appreciate that. Ms. Batchelder?
Nathan Dupree, and then Natha Anderson.
Mr. Dupree will give a moment to come, and Ms. Anderson, if you would prepare to be next. Why don't you, since you're here, would you mind coming on?
Sure.
Thank you so much. You've been here before. You know the routine. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Natha Anderson. I'm proud to say I'm the president of the Washoe Education Association. Today I'm representing those 2,400 WA members, and I'm also representing our support staff. Unfortunately, the president of the WSP was unable to be here today, but she asked me just to kind of combine the two, and there's about 700. So basically, I'm representing about 3,300 members of your employees. I think we need to admit there's some national issues going on here. And many of those things are trickling down to our district. And we cannot change the national issue until we start changing our corner of it. I really appreciate the time and the energy and the conversations that we are engaging in with the superintendent as well as her leadership team. Morale is low across the board, but expectations, workload, class size, stress is high for all of our educators, whether we be teachers, custodians, secretaries, counselors, librarians, the list is long. But again, we have the dialogue started. We are trying to make changes, and we need that time to be able to do so. Just a few of the items that I want to bring up is that we're starting to do that clarification around whether or not these issues are related to our district, are related to a lack of state funding, which was mentioned in the prior letter, or if there are some other state laws and mandates that are adding more to our plate that are completely out of our hands and also completely out of your hands as Board of Trustees and out of the hands of our superintendent. We meet about once a month, and in those times we are able to find ways to help our educators because we've got to take things off our plates. We cannot just go get a larger plate. And I truly do believe that over this time frame, over these next 6 months, we can come up with a plan to try to help our educators, again, love to teach, so our kids can love to learn, because that's really what this is about. I think we've heard before, it's about the kids. As teachers, as educators, as bus drivers, we feel the exact same way. And right now, we have a lot on our plate. We've got to figure out how to, I guess, take some things off. Last night, Superintendent Davis was at our meeting, at our building rep meeting, and was able to hear some of those concerns. And I do believe that she is considering what some of those issues are. In the last few months, we've been having these meetings. So I do believe there will be changes taking place. I know that there are many individuals you will hear from, but I hope that prior to the final evaluation, there's a way for all of your employee unions and groups able to get together and maybe do a task force or do a whole discussion where we can bring forward some of these items so there can actually be a discussion and not simply me testifying on behalf of our members. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Nathan Dupree, then Julie Kemp. Okay.
Mr. Dupree would like to wait. And who's our next speaker?
Julie Kemp, then John Hess.
Ms. Kemp, thank you for being here. Just before you begin, I just want to add that the Board of Trustees has received a letter that will be added to the record here before us from Principal Matt Barak from Marvin Bacolo School, as well as the entire letter from Trustee Raymond, that Trustee Raymond read from Mr. Richard J., the entire letter. I know you ran out of time, or he ran out of time, or both. But the entire letter will also be added to the record, so just wanted to make those notes. So please, go ahead.
Okay. President Taylor, Trustees, and Superintendent Davis. My name is Julie Kemp, and I'm the Executive Assistant to the Chief of Police. I have been with the district for 16 years, at the Administration Building for 10 years, and in my current position for 6 years. I've had the opportunity to work for and with principals, area superintendents, deputy superintendents, and 4 superintendents. During the past 16 years, I have only spoken once in a board meeting, and it was in regards to a previous superintendent and my current department. I'm here today to speak regarding our current superintendent and my department. I want to convey to you how my current work environment has changed for the better since Superintendent Davis has become the superintendent. I no longer have overwhelming feelings of anxiety and distress when my boss is on his way to meet with the superintendent for his monthly meeting or called without notice to that office. I would literally become sick to my stomach while my boss was in the superintendent's office, wondering what was happening. extremely skeptical that my boss was being listened to or that the concerns of my department were being heard or understood. Then upon his return, I would rush back to his office to get the recap of what took place and what we needed to do. That is no longer the case. I see that monthly meeting with the superintendent on his calendar or get a phone call from that office, and I do not give it a second thought. He comes back from his meeting. I ask him how it went, and he says, great, or we have a couple things to work on, and I say, fantastic. I am confident that our current superintendent is going to be fair and consistent with whatever issue needs to be dealt with. We have a working relationship with her, which is vital to the function of our department. We have tremendous respect for her and her position, and she in turn has respect for our department and us. Since I have worked in school police, Superintendent Davis is the first superintendent to ever just stop by the department to say hi. She comes by and asks us how we are doing, how I am doing. She has come to 2 of our department staff meetings to visit and speak to our entire department. She has taken the time to speak to each one of the officers about themselves and their families. This has never happened before. When family or friends ask me what I think of this superintendent, I don't have to say, I would prefer not to talk about work. I can reply honestly with, she's fantastic. She's doing so much good within the district. Or I just spoke with her yesterday and great things are happening. I see Superintendent Davis in the hallway, at meetings, outside of the administration building, or at the store. I know that she will wave or say hi because she knows me. She remembers the people she meets and has contact with. She remembers our names, and she knows who we are because she takes the time to interact with us. I have felt a positive change within both my department and the district since Superintendent Davis' time as a superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Kemp. Dr. McClory, if you're here prepared to, why don't we have you come on? Thank you for being here. And then who's next, Ms. Batchelder?
John Hesse.
Mr. Hesse, you'll be next. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon to the Superintendent, President of the Board of Trustees, and to all the members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Dr. Barbara McClory, and I am here to comment on the evaluation. When viewing the video that accompanied the groundbreaking graduation scores a few weeks ago, the takeaway for me, as it should be for you, is the commitment that was displayed by all high school principals for the welfare of the individual student. For the most part, this has always been a significant barrier when addressing high school reform, which the district began in 2009. This leads me to believe we have turned the corner and that systemic reform is indeed happening throughout the school district. It is my belief that this is a testament to the leadership of Tracy Davis. I was on the Board of Trustees who hired Tracy. I have been on this journey to excellence and reform since 2009, not only as a trustee, I might add, but for 42 years as an educator. I find Tracy to be a warm, kind, generous person with an open personality who believes, as I do, about educating all children and the importance of the role of public education in our society. Both she and I have represented the state of Nevada as distinguished principals, albeit as members of different generations. Her experiential background, knowledge of education, attention to student diversity, along with a plethora of skills and a strongly held belief system, brought her to us at a critical time as we moved into a reform era. This has brought many changes to our schools, creating a normal cognitive dissonance for many of our educators. Our success as a district has happened not only because of our overall excellent teachers and principals and staff to adjust to change, but because of her relentless quest to successfully serve all students. As I have reflected on this present evaluation, I believe that there are some things the board may do to become more effective as a Board of Trustees. Number one, which I think you're in the process of, develop a unified board governing philosophy that includes valuing the superintendent as a #1 priority. This means collaboration, not competition. Professional development in cultural competency, diversity training, and/or courageous conversations. I understand that there will be a new evaluation system developed. My choice would be Center for the Reform of School Systems that was founded by Don McAdams. Tracy Davis is an extraordinary woman, daughter, mother, sister, educator, and friend whom I fully support as a superintendent of Washoe County.
Dr. McClory?
It is my opinion that all of us...
You have been in this seat.
I know.
Dr. McClory.
Let me finish. It is my opinion that all of us need to continue learning and growing. However, I do not, nor have I ever felt she was anything less than highly effective and, last words, the epitome of a strong black woman.
Thank you, Dr. McClory. I give you a pass for being a former board member. Mr. Hesse. Mr. Hesse, I believe you're next. Who's after Mr. Hesse, Ms. Pacelli?
Darlene Hesse.
Oh, Ms. Hesse. Thank you, sir. You know you have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing us some time here. I'm going to change the course. I'm here for the Save Wild Creek group, and it's about replacing a $30 million golf course with a high school. I don't know that how much due diligence has already been done because of the lack of transparency that is shown by, I don't know about this board, but about just you folks in the school district. I feel like you're adversaries right off the gate, and I don't like that feeling at all. I'm a third generation Nevadan. I don't like arguments, but I do like to have people tell me the right thing for the right reasons. And therefore, I'm definitely against this school. You seem to be pushing it pretty hard, and I'm wondering if on the second, third, and fourth other locations, A, B, C, D, if you've really taken a good look at it, or you just drive by and have a cup of coffee and go to McDonald's and then go back to your meetings. I say this because the golf course that you're going to take has got a lot of problems with the existing earth. It's in affluent water, has been for 30 years. The back 9 of the course, you might as well be walking up the Alps. And that's the part that you want to leave for us to play golf, which is not really very smart. So I'm asking if you do your due diligence on Wild Creek and you don't get the answers that you want to get, such as where the ground is going to be okay to work with, or you're going to have to bring in tons and tons of it, if you're going to have to move mountains and you're going to have to move a lot of other stuff, and you had to go to plan B or C or D, what due diligence have you done on these other locations, if any? Again, because we haven't heard of it, and the past track record of spend money like a drunken sailor, I want to rein this thing in a little bit. And you know what? Talking to Mr. Mayor here about the Robert Mitchell School, that school is bomb-proof, and it was built really, really good. And if there's ever an attack, I'm meeting him in the basement because that's where it's going to be. But I'll tell you what, sometime if we don't have the money to buy a Cadillac, we might have to settle for a Chevrolet. I like Chevrolets. I drive a Yukon. But anyway, I think that we're probably going over the top with the money that we're going to be spending on this school. I hope we're not. And you got other schools that you're going to have to build also. And I hope enough tax money comes in that we can build them all. 'Cause education is definitely where we want to go. And so if you will listen and take that to heart, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hesse. Ms. Hesse, I believe you're next.
Darlene Hesse, then Mark Nichols.
Welcome, Ms. Hesse.
Thank you. My name is Darlene Hesse, and I'm here to represent Wild Creek also. I just feel as though this is a very unique property. It's a beautiful property. It's kind of been not taken care of very good by the RSCVA. But, I feel as though when this was put on the ballot, it was an unfair vote because they said the Wild Creek area. They did not say the Wild Creek Golf Course. And I see so many people over there enjoying this golf course. It's really a treasure. It's a very sad thing to see it happen. And also for the animals, it's just a lovely area. The traffic every morning, I see the traffic is just unbelievable. I can't even imagine when the Galleria, all those apartments are filled with people. I mean, we need highways around here, and we do need schools. We need schools, and I tell you, I'm a number one for that, the education, and I think it's so important that we find an area for this high school, but not on the Wild Creek Golf Course. This is a treasure, and this is a green area, and it's really a shame to see this happen. I mean, this is a $30 million golf course, and probably to have it built today would be like $65 million. And it's a lovely place, and I'm telling you, you guys are you should go by there at like 7:45 in the morning and see these poor people trying to get to work. And here's this lovely piece of property that's going to be taken away in a school. I think the school is necessary, but it doesn't need to be on the Wild Creek Golf Course. And I talked to another lady, Jolene, she's one of our group, and she's a young girl. She said she was so tired of being bused over to Billinghurst as a child. She said she had to get up so darn early in the morning. She says, I want to see a high school built in Sun Valley. And I think that would be a much better place for a high school. And I just wonder about if they can't find a place for the high school, how are they going to work for all these other schools that are going to be needed? Where are they going to go? I mean, it seems pretty simple to me that there's all this property around to the north of town, and Spanish Springs, my gosh, you could use another high school out there. That is just so crowded. The highways are crowded. But boy, you guys are going to be
Miss Hesse, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up.
It is up?
Is it? Oh, I'm sorry, it is not up.
No, it's
my
not
bad.
up.
You get extra time now.
Oh, okay. But anyway, this will be an endless problem to build a school there. It is a floodplain. And what happened in Houston was a very terrible thing. And you people really should think about this. This is a floodplain, and it's a golf course, a $30 million golf course for all people to enjoy. And I do not understand why we haven't had a town hall meeting, and our neighborhood has never been included with you folks. Now, at Arrow Creek, there was 50 people just recently. They were all included by everyone here, but not us. We're just sort of, we're in limbo, just like Mr. Caroselli. Mr. Caroselli said he's in limbo about all of this, and we are too.
Now, Miss Tessie, your time really is up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Really is this time. Thank you again for being here.
Mark Nichols, then Wesley Griffin.
Welcome, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here also in opposition to building the high school on the Wild Creek Golf Course. There was a gentleman here at one of your regular meetings a few weeks ago, and he said, I'm in the minority here. I'm for the kids. And somehow he was under the impression that everyone that speaks in opposition to this high school at Wild Creek Golf Course is against a new high school. Nothing could be further from the truth. Everyone in this community, with very few exceptions, are for the kids, for education, new high schools, absolutely. Knock yourselves out. But don't destroy this beautiful plot of land for the high school. There's thousands of acres of land in this vicinity that are completely suitable for building a new high school. much more suitable as far as location goes. It's desert. It's undeveloped land. You've looked at a few alternative locations, and I think that was nothing more than just a process that you had to go through. And these locations that you have chosen were not chosen for their suitability for a new high school. In my opinion, they were chosen for their unsuitability for a new high school. None of the locations that you chose made any sense at all. They made actually more sense than building it on the Wild Creek Golf Course, I will admit that. But there are many other locations that are more suitable for a new high school. We have no problem with building a new high school. Just don't destroy this beautiful plot of land, this beautiful golf course, for that purpose. It's more than a golf course. I played golf there this week, and I believe it was, I don't remember the day, it was Monday or Tuesday, and there was a group of special needs children that were playing the 9-hole executive course. They weren't playing the 18-hole course, they were playing the 9-hole executive course, and they had a lunch, and these kids, let me tell you, I have never seen a happier group of children than these special needs kids that were out there playing golf. And it's also the first tee. It's not just a bunch of old men, retired men like myself out there playing golf, although there are plenty of us. It's a lot more than a golf course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Wesley Griffin, then Liz Griffin.
Welcome, Mr. Griffin. You know the routine. You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Wesley Griffin. I'm here to speak in favor of saving Wild Creek Golf Course. One of the things I'd like to mention is we have been having meetings for 5 months, 6 months now, and we've had one of your board members attend our meeting. We've had meetings for like 5 months. We've had one board member attend our meetings. You've all been invited. Now, Miss Tracy Davis, I'm sure, is a fine lady. Nobody would dispute that. If you go around and talk to the general public about how our school system is doing, you're going to find a lot of opposition to what's going on. Sometimes, the toughest thing to do is to face your critics. But we all can learn when we take the time and we have the courage to face our critics. We have legitimate arguments about building a high school on Wild Creek Golf Course. Number one, the whole thing appears to any rational person has actually been presented in a way to actually circumvent our democratic process. You saw what happened out at Arrow Creek when there was a town hall. There were some people that disagreed. Is that wrong? I ask you, is that wrong? Okay. Another thing too is that in circumventing the public, you have a trusted advisor. You could say that has been less than transparent. Some people, many people, myself included, believe that there's been some dishonesty, some severe dishonesty. Number one, when this was first presented, it was presented to the public in front of five local boards with a letter of intent. A letter of intent was signed without any public input. When I heard that, and several other members heard that, we said, "You're going to spend $100, $200, maybe $400 million of our tax dollars without even a second opinion." There was no Plan B. Pete Eckert has said there's no Plan B. Another member of his staff said the closest thing that we have to a Plan B was maybe some property up with the BLM. After we made our presentation, suddenly now we come up with 9 different places that we could look at. every one of them, of course, failed below what Wild Creek would do. But have a look at the people that evaluated them. Contractors, different people of our construction community that all have a vested interest in agreeing with the school district. The other half was other employees of the school district. Well, now what would you expect from that? You know, we've already said, it's been publicly stated, that if this goes through, there's going to be legal action. It's going to happen. There's going to be legal action because we feel like it's in violation of the NRS code. We feel like it's in violation of the Truckee Meadows Regional Plan, which says that we're supposed to be preserving our recreational areas and green open spaces. This is going to be changing the character of a neighborhood, again in violation of the Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. And we also believe that if you don't look at this a lot more closely than what you have, that there is a violation. You have breached your fiduciary duty to the citizens. So I would suggest, you know, before we have to take it to court, you do your homework. You have not done your homework. So please come join us and talk to us. We have some things to present to you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Liz Griffin, then Mike Palmy.
Ms. Griffin, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Well, as usual, he said it all, so I'll make mine brief. Okay. I was thinking about the situation today, and something occurred to me, aristocracy versus democracy. Okay, we all know, I believe everybody sitting here knows the difference between an aristocracy. What? Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm sure everybody seated here knows the difference between an aristocracy and a democracy. In my personal opinion, I feel that we, the taxpayers and the voters, have been dealt with in an aristocratic manner rather than a democratic manner. Our input has not been sought except for us to come to these meetings and present it. I agree that I feel that when WC1 was passed, it was certainly not clearly delineated that we were talking about replacing the Wild Creek Golf Course with a high school. And once again, we are in favor of education. We've educated our children. Actually, we've educated 4 grandsons as well. So we believe in education. But let me just also point out, a building does not educate children, folks. It happens to be the staff, the teachers, the people behind it. And I think that this proposed project is going to, excuse the expression, fritter away valuable funds that need to be devoted to educating the children. So I would submit to you that I think that this whole project has been handled in an aristocratic manner rather than a democratic manner. And I would like to see all of you reach out more to your constituents and get their opinion on this. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Griffin.
Mike Palmy, then Charles McCubbins.
Mr. Palmy, welcome, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Mike Palmy from the Children's Cabinet Executive Director. Thank you, trustees and Superintendent Davis. So I have the great pleasure of having Superintendent Davis sit on my board at the Children's Cabinet. I'm going to talk about one scope of work that you all, as a board, do through Tracy Davis to the Children's Cabinet. What we do is we have a place called Redfield Academy. It's where 30 students went last year and 12 graduated, 3 were juniors. Tracy sat next to me at that graduation. And we celebrate those 12 graduates because without that school, these kids were 2 and 3 semesters behind in school, right? And they found a landing point with your support through the board. And Tracy is the touch point between you all and the community, which we serve around 12,000 youth a year and their families in our community. And so Tracy gives us that dialogue through the board that goes back into the community that tells us what we're doing right or wrong, right? And so education is the greatest tool of which we will be able to get our kids to be successful. And so in a small way, but a very powerful way, the Children's Cabinet is in support of Tracy, and I'm in support of her as well. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Comey.
Charles McCubbins, then Margot Sistick.
Mr. McCubbins, welcome, sir. You have 3 minutes.
I'm old, so give me some time to get here. I come to speak to you, the board, as not as an educator. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a teacher, but I'm a grandparent. And we put one grandson through the school here. And I'm speaking on behalf of my future grandchildren that will be attending the schools. I'm concerned with the direction that the board is going. You have a track record that says that your spending habits are not the best in the world. That's why in WC1, when we granted that and paid for that and give you our tax money, we said that it had to be spent on schools only. Well, I had a situation where my grandson attended Sparks, and he did it for 1 year. And he didn't have enough books to go around, so the kids had to share the books. Now, I want to tell you that, Miss Davis, I just heard that you're spending $500,000 for this gender-friendly bathroom renovation in the schools. Prudent spending on the WC1 money is what I'm here for. I was told that, well, the books, that falls under a different category in a different area. Well, it might in your world, folks, but not in ours. We're just common people that are paying that money. What you need to do, how you allocate that $500,000 you want to spend to renovate those bathrooms, put it into the books and the teachers and give it back to the kids, because I'm appalled that the state that I live in for 30 years has the lowest education rate in the nation. Even Mississippi is higher than we are. And I got to tell you, you can sit here and applaud yourselves all you want, but the bottom line is that these kids deserve the education that we need to give them. And money's not just the answer. You're trying to put money in brick and mortar, and I'm telling you to put it back into kids where it belongs. And when it comes to the Wild Creek situation, if you really look at this, you know why you need that school? You're busing kids from Sun Valley every day to Sparks and to Hug and some to Spanish Springs, because I give a kid a ride home the other night. You need to, if you build that school, instead of Wild Creek, look to Sun Valley. That's where the kids are being bused from. Renovate Hug High School. That area could use that. That school could use it. Put your money where it's going to do the most good. There's plenty of property there. You don't need to build spread out. You can build up, because everybody knows that going up is cheaper than spreading out. I just ask you guys to be prudent. You got some real decisions coming up. Use the money wisely that we give you and work for the kids, not for you.
Mr. McCubbins, I'm sorry, sir, your time is up. Thank you.
Margot Sistick, Reverend Glenn E. Taylor.
Ms. Sistick? Is that right, Sistick?
Sure. I usually go by Buser, but yeah.
Oh,
Either way.
Buser?
Buser, yes.
Buser.
Margot Buser.
Okay, welcome, Ms. Buser. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am a teacher for our school district, and I have been. This is my 15th year. I'm also a mother of 5 children who are, well, my oldest is in college now, but the other 4 are in schools in Washoe County. And Miss Davis is the first superintendent who has ever taken time to speak with me about being an educator, about being a mother. And I met her when we went to a parent-teacher home visit conference, and the parent-teacher home visit program is a wonderful example of the care that Tracy Davis has for the children and the parents and the educators in our community, because it extends to make these connections so that parents can feel empowered to be advocates for their own children, teachers feel empowered to be advocates for our students. And when we have a woman like Tracy Davis, who is our leader, we feel that we can also be empowered to continue this great work. And I feel like she's just getting started. And I don't think that we can stop this work. Anytime we start a new behavior plan for my students, there's the pushback. I know the next day that kiddo is going to literally push back, probably. And then the days keep going, and years go by, and I get text messages, emails, Facebook posts that say, hey, Miss Sistek, Miss B, whatever my name was at the time, you made me be a better learner. And I kept going to school because you pushed me. They didn't like it. Sometimes we don't like when changes have to happen. And we still need it. We need these changes. We need Tracy Davis to say, I am going to encourage you to continue doing your work, and I'm going to be there with you. She comes into the classrooms. She remembers our life stories that we've told her. The people that I've met at conferences that she's been at too, from across the country, as other people have stated, have said, oh, you're in Washoe County with Tracy Davis? Wow, that is incredible, the work that you guys are doing there. People are talking about it, not just in Sparks, in Reno, in Incline, but all over the country, the work that's being done here with, I have 2 kids in high school right now. There are more of their friends that are staying in school. I have my little boys that are in middle school and elementary school, and my own students who, when Tracy Davis comes in and speaks with them and remembers that they like to make a special salsa, that empowers them. Brian was empowered because Tracy remembered that about him and spoke to us. So thank you for your time.
I don't know what to thank you, Miss Sistek, Miss B. Thank you. Thank you, Margot. Thank you for what you do in schools. We appreciate it.
Reverend Taylor.
I did notice there was 1.47 minutes left over, so I can add that to my 3, right? No.
This is my pastor, so.
Oh, well, that was a try anyway. But to the Board of Trustees as well as Superintendent Davis, I'm just here to tell I call her Sister Lord, Superintendent Davis, thank you. Thank you for saving us over $140,000 since your tenure here. And plus, even when your contract was coming up, you didn't ask for a renewal, automatic renewal, as some of your predecessors. I want to thank you for a simple thing like even using your own cell phone, saving us $1,700, roughly a month, I believe, a month or a year. I want to also thank you for the mere fact that you have put your money where your mouth has been, and that is toward building up the kids in this area. And a lot of people never look at the savings. I want to even thank you for being both an interim and deputy superintendent and going without a contract for 1 year. And nevertheless, most people overlook that as well. But I want to thank you that you didn't leave us. Also want to thank you because your predecessors had an automatic renewal. Even though they had a 4-year contract, they had an automatic renewal each at the end of their contract. You settled for your contract ending June 30th of next year. And I wouldn't have taken that contract myself. But anyway, the bottom line, I want to thank you because you have put your money where your mouth is. And that is making sure that our kids are being served. I still have one grandson and several nieces and nephews that are still going to school through the Washoe County School District. And I want to thank you for being an example. As a superintendent, I've been here since 1970, so I have roughly a 47-year history in this area. And other than Mr. Martinez, who we won't even go there, the bottom line, I want to see you stay if it's all possible. And we just thank you for all you've done for our community. From a church perspective, I want to thank you as a pastor. From just a personal perspective, I want to thank you for being who you are in this community. And my wife wanted to get up with me, but I told her I only had 3 minutes. And and I'm down to 45 seconds. Just wave, Gwen, wherever you are. And again, thank you very much. And I hope, and by the way, I'm appalled. I went through this 31 seconds, 30 seconds left. I'm appalled over the fact that the evaluation was not official, but I went through 37 pages of it in the Reno Gazette-Journal. And I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do business. I think if it wasn't official, then it shouldn't have been broadcast saying minimum meets minimum criteria. To me, that was the only negative I have to say after being here to thank you for all that you've done, okay?
Thank you, Pastor, for leaving 3 seconds on the clock. I know you'll try to reclaim that on Sunday. I know you will.
George Hardaway, then Zoe Price.
Mr. Hardaway, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Former vice principal, former teacher, former coach.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is George Hardaway, retired educator, Superintendent Davis, President Taylor, and the board. I would like to preface these few words with this introduction. Superintendent Davis is the most caring superintendent that I have had the pleasure of working with in the Washoe County School District. And I started my career with Marvin Piccolo way back in the in the late 60s. And I want you to understand that when I look at President Taylor as well as Superintendent Davis and the leadership skills of this board, I say, children, really take heed of what caring is all about. This board has done a phenomenal job in its initiatives since Superintendent Davis has been at the helm. And they are definitely looking forward to a continuation of moving this district forward. Without a lot of support from the state legislators, you have to care about the state education system, and I'm not worried about the NFL stadium that's going to come up here in the state. I am worried about our kids, my grandkids, and I want you to know, Superintendent Davis, you do really care. I have always said that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you don't care about the future of our kids, you don't need to be involved in this process. I'm just telling you, you don't need to be involved because you know caring speaks for itself. Young people know if you care about them. And I tell you, it doesn't matter their background or their circumstance. If they look in your eyes and see that you don't care about them, they will let you, they know that. They know. And so I'm here to say, keep it on, Superintendent Davis. And I want you to know that caring is the most important thing in the educating of our kids, regardless of where they come from. We are here to educate all kids. And I want you to know that in my 36 years, that's what I did. I spent that time. One of my former student athletes.
This is a good time to say thank you, Mr. Holloway. This is a wonderful time. I am so sorry your time is
up. And I tell anybody that I am so proud of this young lady. I tell you, I love her to death.
Your time is up.
I'm on go. Thank you.
That's a wonderful idea.
I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Hello, Board of Trustees.
Welcome.
I am Zoe Price, future graduate of 2018. I was unable to join schools due to me not meeting the expectations of a perfect student. I refused to conform to the norms until Tracy Davis became superintendent that I was actually able to join a school. Because what mattered to the students, the scholars of Washoe County, mattered to her, Tracy Davis. I joined Innovations High School, knowing it was what I was looking for, someone willing to take reins for myself. Tracy Davis was there, fighting to let the big picture model appear at Innovations, allowing me to learn more than I can ever imagine. Tracy Davis was there, planning to create new schools and fix the overpopulation of schooling. Tracy Davis was there, pushing the district to support individuals that are learning inside the buildings. I met her in person, and within minutes, I admired and respected everything she has done. Without her, we would not have a 90% graduation rate by 2020 as a goal. Without her, Taylor Harper would not have been able to create opportunities for at-promise kids and turn an entire school around by 31% graduation increase. Without Tracy Davis, I would have given up on school, refused to pursue it. Instead, now, I wish to become someone that educates. I want to go to college. I would love to work under Tracy Davis, knowing what she believes and says takes action. Giving her a minimal efficient grade is an insult, as we saw her announce that almost every high school went up by 10% if not more in graduation rates alone. She puts her love and work into the district. No one should ever doubt that. If you want proofs of what she does, come to the students, ask the scholars, and even the graduates, what pushed them, and they would tell you that they can tell that Washoe County School District cares because of what Tracy Davis put in place. Thank you very much, and I would not be here now if it was not for Tracy Davis.
We need teachers.
Thank you so much, Zoe and friends.
I'm just going to call this person's first name. Victor.
Oh, I know who this is. Mr. Wowo, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon or good evening, whichever. I'm Ambassador Victor Wowo, Senior. I've lived in this area for 38 years. Superintendent Davis, she's doing a very good job as far as I know. And in the African community, she's really welcome too. Because if you look at what she's doing right now, we in the African community, we are proud of her. Because all our kids, they're doing fine. Matter of fact, as you can recall, my senior boy just did his master's too at UNRO. She finished from Reno here too. So what I would like to say is that she don't need a 2.67% rating. For what? In the first place, the people who did the survey never contact any of the African community to know if she's doing a good job. So I will say the survey they did was very, very wrong because they went into 6 areas and found only one area low for 2.2. So mathematically, you can see that 2.67 rating is mathematically wrong. So I would say Tracy Davis is doing a very good, and we are happy to say we support her. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wobo.
Charlene Marks, then Ed Kendall.
Ms. Marks, welcome, ma'am. Thank you for being here.
Hi. I'm a 6th grade teacher. I've never done this before, and I'm really nervous, but I'm upset because I went to a budget meeting, and we were reassured that we were not going to have 37 students in our classrooms. I have 37 students. I have 7 MTSS students. I have 1 SIP student, and I am expected to do an hour of special things for those MTSS and SIP kids, plus keep the other 30 kids occupied for that hour. Plus, I'm told if I am a very good teacher, I will bring the test scores up. I have 37 students. I wake up at 5 in the morning to grade papers and try to put in grades. I stay till 5 and 5:30 at night, and I do the best job I can with my students, because my students mean everything to me. They are like my own personal kids. And you are wearing me out. I don't know how else to say this. My principal has backed me, and she has gotten nowhere. And I don't know what else to say other than the fact that I'm going to come here to every meeting and tell you what I'm doing, because I'm leaving in June, and I wouldn't be if I didn't have 37 kids. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Marks, and truly thank you for what you do in the classroom.
Ed Kendall.
Do we have Mr. Kendall? Mr. Kendall, welcome, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. How are you? Board of Trustees, good evening. Hello, board members. My name is Ed Kendall. I'm the current president of the Washoe County School Police Officers Association, representing 38 working police officers within the district. I know you're going to hear from numerous district entities talk about various issues. What I'd like to do is build off of a sentiment from a colleague of mine. The working conditions of our employees are the learning conditions for our students. This goes beyond the brick and mortars of our buildings and extends to the climate and cultures of our organizations. The Washoe County School Police Officers Association works to resolve labor issues prior to senior administrative intervention. Superintendent Davis has been very supportive of our efforts and maintains open lines of communications with our association. An ongoing concern of our association is the morale of our workforce, including the conditions and morales of our peers from other associations within the district. Conditions are such that Superintendent Davis's leadership has the ability to address our concerns and better the academic and working environments of our students and employees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall.
That's all at this time.
Those are all the public comments we have, public comments cards we have at this time. Did we miss anyone? We did. Was there a card? Do we have other cards? Yeah, of course. But let's see what she has more in her hand.
Diane Bartholomew.
And who may be next? Ms. Batchelder? Anyone else?
Then Lonnie Feemster.
Okay. Ms. Bartholomew, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I think I checked the wrong box.
It's okay. Thank you for being here.
About 5 years ago, I was in a similar situation of frustration to the teacher we just heard from, but from a parent's perspective. And I was so agitated. I was in a frenzy about my daughter's situation. And I wrote sort of a fiery letter to the board and sent it to everybody I knew, the Superintendent Martinez, and everybody I could get their email into my system. I sent it, and I received, I'd like to give a copy to the superintendent and one for the board for the record, a reply from Tracy Davis. I had attacked and criticized, and I'd also thanked the school. And I'd like to read you the first paragraph of what she wrote in reply. So this is about April of 2013 when she was deputy superintendent. Ms. Bartholomew, I want to thank you for your moving letter. In it, you express many positive experiences with the school district and many legitimate concerns. As a parent, I share some of the same concerns, always wanting the very best for my children. I do want to say how much we appreciate your dedication and your contributions of time and effort to the schools your children have attended. And then she proceeds to address my issues and discuss, you're right, this is a problem. And thank you for letting us know that this is good. I was so touched. So it says right back. I wanted to, that was 5 years ago. I've been meaning to. So I guess this is my official thank you. And I have kept the original all these years. because she then invited me to participate in some district council meetings, and I've been an active member since then of the coffee committee in the district and had a lot of experiences as a parent representative, and I'm so glad that she was able to give me that I could be heard, that I felt a voice, I felt accepted and known, and I don't pay attention much to the money and the things like that, but I feel cared for and listened to, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bartholomew. Please consider your response done. Just check it. Just check it. Mr. Feimster?
Yes, I just want to clarify for the record. I submitted a card to represent the Reno Sparks NAACP, and I wanted to clarify whether I have 5 minutes or 3 minutes.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
All right, I will go faster. Again, hello, trustees. Thank you for your service. Superintendent Davis, I'm in the area of full disclosure. I am married to one of the trustees. I won't tell you which one, but I am formerly a utility market research department employee. I've worked for the U.S. Census Bureau doing community outreach. I've worked for Edison Research doing exit and entrance polling. And I'm currently the education chair of the Reno Sparks NAACP, and the president of the branch is aware of my presentation today. I am very interested in data analysis, surveys, and market research. I looked at the report on Superintendent Davis. I was, and of course I've been here all my life and been involved with many of the superintendents over the past 30 years, 35 years with my wife. We used to come before this body to try and get her a job as a principal. But I noticed the areas of excellence in student achievement, in financial resources, getting the bond money for capital improvements, the community connectivity. And I understand you as board members have the responsibility and authority to evaluate. However, I think it's important, and it would be morally wrong to reduce a person to numbers only. I was a little disappointed in the Gazette Journal's article yesterday that said superintendent rated as minimally effective. Well, being a student of data analysis, I know you cannot just reduce people to data. Statistical models have different levels of accuracy. And when you look at the polling that was done and the numbers, I immediately called to say, who's being polled? I sent out my request for survey to 100 people. I immediately found out they only let one person answer it. Had to call the data company in order to get them to take my data. But I know that if you take numbers out of context, you can make anyone look bad. Amen. And if you don't disaggregate the data, you won't recognize the fact that the superintendent has achieved the most important goals of the Washoe County School District, and that's student achievement, getting the required capital. You know we're underfunded as a school district and as a state, and getting connected to the community. So I think we need to take the most important issues and give added weight to those issues, because in those areas the student was rated as excellent. I also noticed that it said all the trustees did not have consensus and evaluate the same question and evidence the same. That's a surprise. I watch the school board meetings. But thank you, and I fully support the superintendent in her work, and that's from the branch.
Thank you, Mr. Feimster.
Bryn LaPenta.
Good afternoon,
Dr.
President
LaPenta, thank
Taylor.
you for being here.
Thanks. It's nice to see everyone, members of the Board of Trustees, Superintendent Davis. My name is Bryn LaPenta, and I work in the Office of Student Accounting for the school district. I've spent 25 years in education and worked in multiple states and for multiple districts and more superintendents than I can count. Okay. I would also tell you that I have a doctorate from the university, or from Pepperdine, and part of the leadership doctorate talks about culture and how important culture is. And I don't think, just kind of like algebra, you don't really understand it till you get out into the real world and you have to use it. You don't understand how important culture is until you experience negative culture. And in the last 8 years in the Washoe County School District has been a beautiful case study on the effective culture for the employees and how we're able to move children forward. Previous to Tracy, there was a culture of fear. I was afraid at any given time I could be fired. I wasn't treated respectfully. I wasn't treated as a professional. And what happens when you have a culture of fear is that you're afraid to make decisions, you're afraid to grow, and you're afraid to be innovative because you're afraid that something bad is going to happen to you. With Tracy, there has been this culture of respect that has been so wonderful to work for her. I'm not afraid to make a decision. I'm not afraid to go and talk to her, and she's always available to me. I'm not afraid to go and tell her, hey, this might go a little sideways, you know, and I'm not afraid of that. And I think that that's a very powerful thing. And I've been able to grow, I've been able to innovate, and I haven't been afraid to do it. And it's such a wonderful thing. And to think that she might be rated minimally effective is a reflection also on me as her employee, that I would be minimally effective also. So I encourage you to think very carefully about Tracy, because the culture here is one that allows growth and innovation and student success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. LaPinta.
Janessa Bowden.
Ms. Bowden, welcome. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Janessa Bowden. I'm currently a junior at Reed High School, and I play for the Reed varsity volleyball team. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's kind of hard for me to talk about this. It's still raw, and to be honest, it's still happening to me. I don't know if you guys are aware of the situation that's taken place or what's happened, but I've been bullied by my coach for a few years. And when I brought it to my admin's attention the year before, like last year, they didn't do anything about it. They actually took her side. And so this year, when another bullying incident occurred, I had minimal trust and faith in my admin, so I came to the district. And when I brought it to the district, I didn't like the way that the investigation was carried out. I feel like I was forgotten about as a player and a student. And it's really hard for me because throughout this entire thing, I've been bullied by not only my coach, but my peers and my classmates and my teammates and stuff. And I've just been going through it with them. And when the district was carrying out a bullying investigation that we reported, they wasn't like the punishment was very mild. And I believe it's simply because of the fact that one of the girls who was involved in the bullying was this area superintendent's daughter. And I feel like that really had an impact on the way that it was carried out. And I really just want this to be fixed, not only for me, but for the kids in the future. I don't want nobody to go through what I'm going through. It's hard. And I've been trying to be strong throughout this entire thing. I can't explain to you guys the pain that I feel. And how nothing. I just want things to get better. Oh,
right, I'm going to put myself together. I'm Shanique Bowden. I'm Janessa's mother. And first, I want to speak about the inequity opportunities for African American kids in the school district. But before I start with her situation, I want to talk about, I just want to give a food for thought. Like, outside of Hug High, have there's been any African American kids to play at quarterback in all of Washoe County outside of Hug? Those opportunities don't exist for our African American kids because they are playing. My daughter Janessa was denied an inequitable opportunity at Reed High School volleyball program. She was subjected to racial discrimination, bullying, and retaliation for standing up and addressing the inequitable opportunities and the treatment she received. In our investigational reports, it states that my daughter was subjected to racial animus. I would like that to be explained to me. I would like to know if there were any other minorities that was in her investigation. It bothers me to think that the district would believe that the feelings towards my daughter and her class, I wanted to make sure that my daughter and the coach, they said that the feelings were mutual. Those feelings of animosity didn't come till after the coach bullied my daughter and turned her classmates against her. Not to mention coaches and players from the high school team associated, or the coach that was associated with the club N&J. N&J is the volleyball club that monopolized Washoe County School District volleyball program that the district allowed to happen. Due to the backlash of her teammates, class coaches and other players from other schools created a negative image of my daughter and emotional distress that my daughter now has to experience. My husband and I are really considering moving her out of the state and away from her family and her siblings. This is a serious issue. It's just that her emotional state is more important to us than to allow this thing to keep happening to her. But the most disturbing issue that I have with the school district is that we have a high-level district employee that was involved in bullying my daughter, and the employee found a loophole in the district in order to have his daughter not serve the punishment. My husband brought this to the district attention to show how corrupt this looks. The same employee's daughter is also affiliated with the club N&J. This same employee he has now recused himself, but he should have done that a long time ago, knowing that his daughter was involved in the bullying case. So all of this to say is that I would love for you guys to, when you guys do investigations, look at the kids, not just covering up for yourselves, because we have kids that are hurting.
Thank you, Ms. Belden.
That's all at this time, unless anyone else wants to come up.
That's the final public comment card we have at this time. Was anyone else overlooked? Okay, seeing none, why don't we have a quick break, and then we'll jump into the remainder of our agenda. So we'll take a 10-minute recess, everyone, and then we'll get going once again. We're in recess for 10 minutes. Okay, we'll go ahead and reconvene. We have another board member who's making his way back. We want to go ahead and get started. We know the hour is late, and we have plenty of things left to do on the agenda, like adopt the agenda. How about we start with that?
Move approval.
It's been moved by Vice President Simon Holland and seconded by Trustee Mayer that we adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? The motion is carried. Let the record show that it is unanimous. We'll move on to agenda item two. Agenda item two will go begin right with agenda item 2.01. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action for the acceptance of the draft performance evaluation for Ms. Tracy Davis, Superintendent, Washoe County School District. This is an evaluation for the 2016-2017 school year. This is for possible action. I am listed as a presenter, but I am not a presenter. But before I turn it over to our presenters, Erica Olson from On Strategy and Karen Jensen from HRC, or Human Resources Connection, Vice President Simon Holland just has a statement to make on behalf of us, and we'll ask the ladies if you would please go ahead and get into position and be prepared to present. You'll be the next voice we'll hear.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a comment I wanted to make at the start of this discussion. I wanted to put on the public record a correction to a characterization that was described in a newspaper article in the Reno Gazette-Journal yesterday. The rubric that this Board of Trustees was given to utilize in developing this evaluation specified that the number ratings corresponded to the following language. 1 equaled developing, 2 stood for emerging, 3 stood for accomplished, and 4 stood for distinguished. I have been advised that this language also corresponds to the language currently used in teacher evaluations per NRS. To characterize an average rating between 2, emerging, and 3, accomplished, as, quote, minimally effective, is inaccurate according to the scoring system that we were instructed to use and did use for this evaluation. The language used in the newspaper article may have referred to an older system which was not used this year and was misapplied to these results. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President Simon Holland. And you'll see that those corrections are made accordingly as we go forward with the presentation. So am I turning it over to Ms. Olson from On Strategy? Thank you, ladies. Thank you for your work on this process. We know it has been a long process and certainly a challenging process. What I would like to say is, as Board of Trustees, the single most important thing that we do is provide for a quality superintendent for the 64,000 students in the Washoe County School District. An evaluation process allows us to celebrate successes, celebrate areas of greatness, and of course it also allows us to identify any growth opportunities. Although not a perfect process, it is a process that we take very seriously, and really give you our full attention as we look to your results and then have our own discussion.
Okay, all right. Thank you, President Taylor, trustees, Superintendent Davis. On behalf of Karen and myself, we thank you for the opportunity to be entrusted with this process. It is a very important process, as we all know and have been through for the past couple of months. And wanted to kind of just mention, as we're walking through this, that the comment that Vice President Holland made is we'll talk about the information and the process and the tools that are provided as part of this, process, and then at the end we'll talk about some recommendations that we have that might help this be a little bit easier and smoother going forward. So just kind of to acknowledge that. Just by way of quick introductions, and I know we'd like to get into the meat of the matter, so we'll be quick with this. Myself and my organization is leading the process, and our responsibility is to conduct the staff survey, the staff and community survey, and facilitate the process overall. So our expertise is in that realm. Karen's expertise from HRC is in human resources. So I'd like a shout out to our team, Tim and Howard and Taylor, who worked really hard on all of this as well. So they're here with us in spirit. Looking a little bit at framing up what we want to get done today, and President Taylor mentioned this as well, so I'll just take a minute to kind of talk about the purpose. There's a ton of information to look at. A lot of data and even more data behind all of this, of course, that's summarized in the report that you have. So a suggestion that we would make is the evaluation can be broken down into thinking about areas of excellence, opportunities for growth, and then really providing a foundation for identification of goals for the current school year that we're in. So that's really kind of the backdrop of what we need to get done today. And I want to just mention what you can expect from us is a fair and accurate reporting of the results. Our role and responsibility on behalf of this process is to facilitate the process, not evaluate the superintendent. And that, of course, is the role and scope of the Board of Trustees. So you'll notice our report does not make any summarizations nor judgments on the information that's provided, but merely reports on the data that we have been given and have collected. as we're going through this, a suggestion I might make to the trustees is to think about the conversation in these three categories so we can move from sort of a historical look of an evaluation from the previous school year into what a forward look might be for the upcoming school year, which I think is the most productive use of our time in really getting to establishing goals and what do we learn from this and what are we going to do about the information that we gathered. You know, certainly the success of this process and the quality of this process it rests on all of us. You know, the quality that we bring to the table, the superintendent, the trustees, the community and staff and everybody that showed up here today and the voices that are in the survey as well. So, you know, just being honest, and President Taylor mentioned this, there is nothing easy about this process, not one bit of it. And I know that I speak for both of us when we say that we've worked really, really hard to manage this with fidelity and the utmost protection of that. So, you know, we're here because of our deep commitment to the district and the kids. That's why we're all here. So, the frame for today, I would say, is let's think about how this information can be used to do even more work and betterment for the kids, because that's what we all care about. So,
Ms. Olson, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment to
for
do two things that I forgot to do. I'm going to go ahead and open up agenda item number 2 as 2.02, which is a discussion of the goals. Just in case some of that conversation comes up as we're discussing, we won't be out of order. The intention still is to take those as 2 separate agenda items and in order, but I want to make sure that we stay in order, that we won't go out of order. And also, I'm going to just ask Ms. Olson and Ms. Jensen if they will just facilitate the process. If there are questions, please look to them to call upon you, and then we'll engage freely through the discussion. If they miss you, because I told them our universal sign for I want to speak is to turn on your red light, but if they miss that, I may help them recognize that as well, just in order flow. Forgot to mention those earlier, but I want to. That may help facilitate our discussion. So please go ahead. Thank you for that interruption.
awesome. No, that's great.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Mayor?
We're not discussing anything, are we? Because we should have a motion on the floor in order to discuss.
Well, we will, as we go along, they'll talk about, they'll go through the report, and there may be questions on the report as we go along. That will happen, and then we'll begin discussion after that. So at this point, it isn't open discussion. It's a report. It's a report. We're receiving the report at this time, and I do want to say, Student Representative Chacon had a rehearsal she had to go to, and she mentioned that to us during the break. So, ladies, if you will, thank you.
So to that point, you know, what we'd like to see is we'll get through the high points of the data in the presentation, taking clarifying questions, and then use as much time as we can for discussion and dialogue, because that's really the purpose of today. So with that, Karen's going to walk us through the structure of our discussion.
Good evening. Karen Jensen for the record. So our presentation today, it's going to begin with a description of the process that was used for this evaluation, and the process and the tools that were utilized were voted on and approved by the Board of Trustees. We will start with key points, both from the trustees' feedback and also from the staff and community survey feedback. Then we're going to walk through each dimension. At the end of our portion of presentation, the floor will go to Superintendent Davis to present items that are in motion, new focus areas, and challenges. Then the floor, to your point, will open to the trustees for any discussion on the dimension. We will also open up the floor at the very end for discussion as well, in both places. In the event that there's not discussion after a dimension, we'll open it up at the very end as well. The superintendent's evaluation is based on 6 dimensions, as you can see on the slide: strategic district leadership, instructional leadership, systemic leadership, collaborative leadership, board relationships and personal and professional ethics, and organizational leaderships. And hopefully we will conclude the day by discussing superintendent goals for this year. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Erica for talking about our discussion guidelines as we go forward.
So just some thoughts on this. Karen already talked about the first point. We are delivering this information within the process that that was approved and that exists today. We'll be keeping a little parking lot, so let's stick with the dimension if we can. There's a lot of overlap in these dimensions, no doubt about it, but to the best of our ability, let's stick with the dimension at hand. A suggestion might be maybe 15 minutes per dimension. We're not going to do a massive presentation. We'll hit the high points as we mentioned, and as President Taylor said, we'll do our best to facilitate the conversation. So let's jump in, just do a little bit of stage setting. The process itself is familiar to you. This is what you approved at the July board meeting and have seen in various forms since then. It started with a staff and community survey as requested by the board, and you requested more feedback this year, so we worked really hard at that. I want to make a really important point about this. I think it's pretty obvious, but just to state it anyways, the purpose of that was to provide perspective to the trustees. It was not to be an evaluation in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So that's super important. We were not asking for the staff and community to evaluate the superintendent. They were just merely input for the trustees. That information then moved into the superintendent's self-evaluation, where she completed her own self-evaluation using the same rubric as the trustees, and also put the portfolio together of evidence that was provided to the trustees in advance of their evaluation. And you can see the data points that were provided to the board in their evaluation packet, the superintendent's self-assessment, and then also all of her evidence of performance, the staff and community survey, and the district graduation rates were provided. So that all went into the interview process, which Karen conducted. So walk us through that.
Awesome. So HRC met with each trustee and Superintendent Davis, and we interviewed each trustee anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on the individual at the district office. We began each interview with specific instructions on how the interview would occur and instructions regarding the usage of the rubric. Our purpose in our interviews was to get scores and evidence for the superintendent's evaluation. We went through each dimension with each trustee. They told us their score. They told us their evidence. After reviewing all the dimensions with the trustees, we printed a copy of the key points that we had documented during the interviews, and immediately following the interviews provided this information to the trustees in paper. And that brings us to our fourth box today, where we are today presenting the evaluations and goal setting. So we thought it would be a good idea to walk through the rubric that the trustees were worked with. And on the slide, this is an example of the rubric, not that you can really see it, but I will walk you through it. Each dimension has a defined standard, which is at the top of the top box on the rubric. And there are between 2 and 3 elements for each standard. And for each standard, there are 4 ratings. Developing, which is progress is minimal. Emerging, progress is being made. Accomplished, progress meets the expectation. And distinguished, which is progress exceeds expectations. These levels are cumulative across the rows of the rubric. And in each rating, there are criteria definitions in all the columns for the ratings. Therefore, according to the instructions, to move into a next rating level on the rubrics, trustees had to have all the boxes checked in the prior rating to move up in a rating. The evidence indicators indicators at the bottom of the rubric were voted upon by evidence and example evidence for trustees to draw upon. And Erica's going to talk about evaluating the process standards, evaluation process standards.
Right, so this is just a little calling out a few points about the standards that were provided and basically the framework that we need to work within. So their evaluation handbook that was provided as part of the was actually the July board meeting, was approved in September 2016. So this is where, actually there's a checklist for how the evaluation is supposed to go. This is where the rubric exists, as well as, and I think this is what Vice President Holland was calling out, the last page has the specific rubric summary with the scales on it that we used. So that's where it came from, and that's what's also on page 8 of the evaluation report. So it sounds like maybe this should have been updated, and I'm not really sure the process for that, but nevertheless, we use this standard as the tool and the rating scale for our report. So that's where it came from. Pointing out a couple of other things, the survey tool was also provided to us. We added a couple of questions to help create a model, but the activities are all the same. That was standard. It's on a 1 to 5 point scale. We've been asked why the scales are different between the survey tool and the rubric. Again, we were not in a position to change the tools at the end of the evaluation period. If you want to change the tools, we need to change them now. But at any rate, so the tool was provided 1 to 5 scale, best practice in survey work. The rubric 1 to 4, that's a best practice in rubrics. So that's why. The board directed us to conduct a staff and community survey and requested a response rate higher than last year. The rubric itself is based on the American Association of School Administrators Professional Standards for the Superintendency. As I understand it, that's where it came from. There are evidence examples listed in the rubric about what a standard performance in that dimension looked like, so that was also there. And then just to call this out, there were not formally adopted superintendent goals for the school year in which the evaluation is reflecting. So in comment to some of the public comment, that's why we're not assessing the superintendent on established goals, because we don't have those. We have the rubric, and that was the tool. So I know we have this strategic plan, but the evaluation process is based on the rubric. So at the end of the discussion today, we will come back to these and make some recommendations for improvements going forward into the upcoming year for your consideration. All right, so just really quickly, I want to walk through a few key points from the staff and community survey. Question number 1, the reliability of the survey. It is statistically significant with a 95% confidence interval. It is a 16% response rate from those that received the survey. It was provided to all staff, and the community outreach database provided by the district and some other groups that were requested at the July board meeting. You can see the number of completes up there. I think what matters, just to call this out for a second, in the report that we provided, we segmented the results based on a self-selected, as a respondent, you self-selected who you were, because it was anonymous. So at any rate, we provided the response rates and all the responses by those different segments, because you would expect the superintendent to have sort of different levels of engagement with those different groups within a 3,000 person employee base. So should you just want to look at the leadership team, that information is there. The district leadership, that's there. The site administrators, that is there. For those leadership levels, really, really high response rates. So, and that's what we were really looking for. The strength of the survey. So I had mentioned just a little bit earlier, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I think there's more power in this work, but for purposes of today, I want to call out how it helps us set priorities, and how we use it beyond today is another conversation. We took the survey and we created a district effectiveness model by asking a question about an outcome to create a statistical model between driving activities and the outcome of those activities. So the question that is the outcome is the question that you see there on the bullet point, which is, would you recommend the district as an exceptional district that fully meets the educational needs of its students? And the results are 31%. I'd like to put a big headline on that. Is that good or is that bad? We've never asked that question before, so the value of that is merely whether or not we have a statistical model we can work with and understand of all of the activities and of all of the feedback that we have in the dimensions, which ones are the most impactful. And so I would recommend, if we ask this next year, then we would have a benchmark. We don't have a benchmark for this year. So what's interesting is there are 3 dimensions that have a bigger impact than the other 3 as it relates to the overall perception of the district effectiveness, and we can use that when we're thinking about goal setting, and that's why we did that. So we'll look at that on the next slide in just a minute. And then I just mentioned this as well. The data can be used more broadly than just for the superintendent evaluation as well. And those are some conversations that Superintendent Davis and I have started with her leadership team, and what else we can unpack from the feedback from staff. So this is the model from the survey, and the top 3 dimensions that have the biggest impact, or they are the biggest drivers statistically, are the organizational leadership dimension, the instructional leadership dimension, and the collaborative leadership dimension. And for the stats people in the room, the appendix has the coefficients and the strengths of the causal relationship, so you can unpack that a little bit more should you choose to do so. But again, the headline about this is what does this year look like? What are we focusing on? What are the goals for the superintendent? That's a really good place to start looking. All right, Karen's going to walk us through some key points from the Board of Trustees.
So before I begin on this slide, I just wanted to say that in all of our interviews with the trustees and the superintendent, there was an absolute focus on the kids, and an absolute focus on this process just improving and or capitalizing on what we were doing well. And that was a theme that isn't in this report, but something that I wanted to say. So I'm just going to highlight a couple items on this slide, only because these are going to come up again in the dimensions. For an area of excellence, these are some key terms, key themes. Areas of excellence, as we saw earlier in some of the students speaking, some of the teachers speaking. Superintendent Davis has a laser focus on student achievement, and the trustees all agreed upon that, and that she creates a culture of respect through her integrity, her honesty, and fairness. An area of opportunity that we heard was that the trustees would like to focus the strategic plans and district goals in a more structured, regular, and inclusive manner. And also another area of opportunity is just some relationship and team building between the board and the superintendent, and the board within themselves, to create some continuity.
So we're going to jump into going dimension by dimension, and I'd like to mention that the report is directly in line with that. So if you want to look at the report, you'll see the information organized in the same manner, and more of it as well. So just as a reference point, I kind of want to just point that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So moving forward, dimension by dimension. So dimension 1, strategic leadership. The elements are 1A, vision, mission, strategic plan. 1B, data-driven planning and decision-making. The score was an average 2.8 of 4. A couple highlights in this particular area. The State of Education address was mentioned as being very effective, that it gave specifics. It was factual. Superintendent Davis had students share stories, and it articulated the vision for the district. And as stated earlier, Superintendent Davis has a very clear plan and emphasis on graduation rates. The plan of 90% graduation rates by 2020 was mentioned many, many, many times. Regarding data-driven planning and decision-making, trustees felt that there was a need to refocus on the data and how that relates to the strategic plan, and that targets and outcomes for the strategic plan have not been defined or specific. I do want to make an important note here that was mentioned to us, is that the trustees pointed out that they have recently held a strategic planning meeting, and there is movement on the above mentioned items that I just stated. And so Erica's going to talk about the staff and community perspective on Dimension 1.
So obviously the survey has quite a few activities in each of these dimensions, so I'm just highlighting the summary question, which is the overall question asking about this dimension. And with that, I'll also point out a few comments. There were open-ended comments asked for based on how you answered this question. So if you answered 4 or 5, we asked why. If you answered 3, we asked why. If 1 or 2, we asked why. So again, the survey 1 to 5 scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree. The results are reported in the groupings of strongly agree and agree, so those are grouped together, and that's how all the data is presented. And by way of notion, if you want to know why we did that, it's a best practice in reporting on data. It's also the way last year's was presented as well, so we'll stick with that. So the overall question is, does the superintendent demonstrate critical strategic leadership by providing direction for all stakeholders? The dimension average is 2.63 out of 5. In congruency with what the trustees said, some responses about areas of excellence were graduation rates, as well as holding and attending community meetings. Some areas for growth related to teachers and staff perceiving they did not have support or communication with and did not have the opportunity to provide their input on strategic initiatives or goals. What's up on the screen right now is an example, and we'll do this just to, again, provide context. Agreed upon evidence examples. So as I mentioned at the beginning, in the rubric there were identified examples of what good looks like in this area. So you can see up here what was agreed upon: state of education, input from stakeholders, 4 fundamentals, graduation initiative, school safety, the strategic plan, KPIs, and department reports. I'll highlight these as we go through the dimensions, and I'll only highlight the ones that are different because in some cases they repeat themselves. So I just wanted to say that this, in the rubric, it was agreed that these are items that articulate what good looks like in this particular dimension. So with that, we'll pass it over to Superintendent Davis to talk about her thoughts about the learnings.
Thank you. So sorry. And I know that you guys have done a lot of hard work, and this is one of those things that we just have to do in public, and sometimes it gathers the emotions of people based on what they feel and what they believe in their experience. And so I want to start with saying this is such a great opportunity for growth for not only myself and the district, but also the board as a team, because we're going to learn a lot of information about things that we are doing. And I will be just as committed to our students as I was the day I was appointed. But I have to share that I'm a little concerned about the lack of clarity around one portion of the process. When we started this process, we agreed upon the rubric and we agreed upon what that evidence would be. So I went off a whole year collecting that evidence based on what we agreed on. The clarity portion I'm not sure we all understand is, how do you reconcile that? So if I collect evidence, right, in which we agreed upon, and a board member says, which they naturally might not get because they're not like doing everything the same. How do you bring that together? So if I give myself, say, a 3, and somebody else gives me a 1, and I base that 3 off the evidence I collected all year, and then the board member says, no, it's a 1, that's fine, but how do you reconcile that? Like, that's where we're kind of stuck, or I'm stuck personally, right? Or if we know there's evidence for a 4 and someone gives a 4, and I'm assuming they have to provide evidence of 4, so evidence of a 4 exists, then you get a 1. Like, how do we reconcile that as a team? Because I think we have to work on that, because that lacks the clarity in some of this process. And with that being said, I think that there was some great information that came out, and we really tried to triangulate themes that we saw with the board and themes that we saw with the survey to see how we could improve upon our district. So if you look at the activities and motions that are listed, we're working on metrics to establish for our strategic plan. Of course, we will continue to do the data summit, and the data summit is the opportunity where we do a deep dive in all types of data, whether it's 8th grade reading scores, whether it's attendance, truancy, GT, disproportionality. We do that annually when we receive all that data at the end of the year. Of course, we have BIG, We also have data systems that are more transparent than ever before. If you look at the work we're doing around WCSD, data.net, we've become very transparent with that data than we have in the past. And of course, we have systems to support our building leaders. We have the turnaround zone. We did an acceleration zone. There's Washoe and Nevada Leads. And then we really are working on making data easier to interpret to the public. Because part of that is that the public doesn't understand our data, and we really try to make it more easy for the everyday reader or parent to understand. But of course, as we look at this, there are truly opportunities for growth. And one of the opportunities for growth is to look at and target setting indicators used earlier for mid-course correction. When we supervise teachers, I'm a former supervisor, we don't wait to the summative evaluation to correct. Anybody in HR knows that if something's happening, there has to be a discussion to ensure that that's mid-course correction. And so that is an opportunity of growth not only for myself, but the Board of Trustees also. We need to continue to use assessment data in a more effective manner to inform instructional needs of our students. As we look at where we want to go, when we say every child by name and face to graduation, we're saying every opportunity for every child to finish and have an opportunity to go to college or the military or a highly skilled career. So we're going to work and continue to look at those opportunities. Also look at using additional indicators for successes and failures, and how do we report those out on a regular basis. And as always, better and more effective communication on those successes, but also to share the struggles that we could have. So some of the challenges around Dimension 1, I think the consistency of board goals. This just happens to be a transition year and an election. So some people left the board for 6 months who are evaluating. 6 new people came, right? And if you come on new, we know we've had rich discussions around changes, which we've already started implementing on. However, the evaluation is about what the original board members approved and expected me to execute. We know that the NSPF is in a state modification, but we're getting that information out. We're training our schools. I've worked diligently with our staff to work with the state and the state superintendents to get that information out. And unfortunately, there's delays in assessment data. And this has been one of those weird times where we don't get information as fast and it takes all year. But eventually, when the assessments get to us faster, we will be able to provide that information faster. I think the largest challenge is myth versus reality. And if you sat in here today, you heard someone say that I approve transgender bathrooms. And we know that's a myth. That's not how the process is. When we look at the survey data, it is clear that there's some good information to glean from to make us stronger. But we cannot neglect the fact that people identified fake news in the survey data. They actually said that I don't live in Reno, that the board sends me to whatever. One can only assume you'd have to be biased if you stated those things, because I actually have lived down the street from Debbie Feemster for 6 years. But that's okay. We have to just be careful about how much we use that information, because we want to make good decisions for the district and our student and not get too far away because somebody said something, because we all have to acknowledge the survey is based on how people feel. They don't have rubrics. They don't have facts. A lot of it is dealt with how they feel, which we have to assume that's valid. We have to assume it's valid, but that doesn't mean that it is the truth.
You know why those people weren't wrong. You don't live in Reno. You live on Sparks Boulevard in Sparks, Nevada.
That's right. But I think still, there's great information that came out of here. And as you can see, we look for opportunities of growth. But there are super challenges that we have to get over, because when we make decisions, they can't be based in myth versus reality. We are a country of fake news, and sometimes people like to believe fake news. We can't make decisions based on fake news. We have to make decisions for our children and our district on facts. So that is my Dimension 1.
So before we move off of that, then, just a question for the trustees. Do you have everything that you need to know about Dimension 1? Or are there questions that we need to address before we move on?
Thanks. Thank you, Erica and Karen. So I just want to make sure and give you an opportunity to share with us. I think a very valid question was asked about how do we reconcile the board's perceptions with the evidence that was provided. And because the rubric translates that evidence into language and descriptors about process or about practice, could you say a little bit more, and maybe this is for Karen, I don't know, but the board members were asked to, as you said, a 4 meant that all of those things were in evidence all the way through, but there's still some of it subjective judgments about how you interpret the language of the 1 or the 2 or the 3 or the 4 practices that are there. I just wanted to offer if there's anything you wanted to say about that, because there still is some subjectivity in it.
Well, I could speak to it generally as an HR professional. And what I would say is that in any performance evaluation process, you cannot take out completely subjectivity. And I don't know if that helps or doesn't help, because people come to the table with their own experiences, their own backstory, their own education, their own understanding, and that can influence their decision making.
Adding to that as well, and I was just trying to go back to that slide that had the examples on there. It's not working, but just to point that out for just a minute, one suggestion that we had, which you'll see later with our list of suggestions, was the evidence that's listed does not have any qualifications on it. So for example, one of the evidence points is staff retention rates, but it doesn't say staff retention rate, what about them, right? And so I think even the evidence is awesome, that's really great. And so basically that means if we have a report on staff retention rates, then that's as far as that particular bullet point takes it. And that is how all of the evidence points are written. And so I think it is hard to determine how the evidence is applied to the rating. So
the second part I was going to say to your question, because I knew I would be asked it, the second part of it is that if there's a disconnect, then oftentimes it is an education, a group education, a consistency issue, and a communication issue, all which are solvable. Not in this particular moment, but they are for the future.
Can I go? But in this particular moment, it's an evaluation and a judgment of the superintendent, who was sent out to say, over a year, you need to collect these artifacts that we agree would be effective. That's just the truth. And I spent a year collecting evidence, 3,000 artifacts that would say that I was effective. But what I'm hearing is, even though that was probably the process, which you were not a part of, so for full disclaimer, that's not actually how this has been interpreted. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I'm not actually sure.
That's probably a question for the trustees.
Yes.
So when we built the rubric, we went through what evidence would be to support an effective superintendent. Here are the things we agree. I didn't make those things up, right? Those are the things that we agreed in those domains. When that was approved, then the year I did the work, it was a year of collecting the evidence that we agree would be an effective superintendent. These are the things we want to see. Listen, evaluation is, if you tell me you want to see this, I'm going to ensure check mark every one of those are there. We know that's why it's 3,000 artifacts. But that doesn't feel like what happened. That's where the confusion is. If we agree that I have to show these 6 things to be effective, and I showed those 6 things in the process, check, how could I get a 1? Like, that's where I think there is some confusion and clarity.
Well, okay, so here's my 2 cents on this. You collected a lot of evidence, and I think that the difference is just how each board member interpreted that evidence. So if you brought forth 3,000 pieces of evidence to show how you're meeting those different goals, then as a board member, we would look at all that evidence, and then our interpretation would be a 2 or a 3 or a 4. But that's based, I think, on each board member's experience. And And so I think, is that kind of leading towards what you're
Yeah,
asking?
I think that shows that that's a challenge. How would I know what you 7 different people think about what evidence is? That's why when we agreed on you show these documents, when the rubric was approved, it said if you show these pieces for evidence, right, this is what effective is. So we can truly all agree that there are some issues around how we do this, right? But the flip side of it is, if you tell me to collect 6 artifacts, we believe this would make you effective, and I collect those 6 artifacts, and we agree upon that, we can't go back and say, well, I felt there was this, and you, because how would I know? How would I understand that? That's the challenge. And I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong, but I think it's challenging to be able to understand that.
I think here's another piece that's challenging, is that 4 new board members were elected, and I don't think that it was clear, at least it was not necessarily clear to me, that we were not going to be given an opportunity to evaluate those goals or those metrics or that evidence. We didn't ever have that conversation that, no, you're not going to have a voice in that until much later. So, yeah, so I think, and again, because we didn't have that conversation, some of us, including myself, we had the conversation, so when are we going to talk about the strategic plan and the goals and what the metrics are, and we actually didn't have that conversation until August. And so, again, it's not a mistake, but at least from this trustee's perspective, I had thought that we would have a new opportunity, having been elected and installed in our offices in January, to revisit the strategic plan. And actually, we didn't change very much. We just set some metrics and targets in place. But we didn't have the opportunity to say, yes, we endorse that these are the goals and the metrics and the evidence that you should use. And it's again, no one's at fault for that, but we didn't get to have that conversation.
And I actually agree with you. That's actually the truth.
And I will say part of that is because as the 4 new trustees come in, we're halfway through the year. You know, already halfway through the evaluation period. And so at that point, it's one of those times when you don't get 4 new trustees very often, you know, and that does happen. And then when it did happen and it turned in January, half of the evaluation period was already over. And then as we got into the evaluation, and I was talking to some people about this yesterday, as we got into the evaluation and as we got into the our all governing together with the 7 of us and learning about, you know, which system do we use, that's part of what Trustee Franco brought up. And, you know, right at the beginning of all that, I got sick. Bottom line, I mean, that's part, you put all those things together, then there are some things that we would have and should have done earlier in the process. And because things failed the way that they did, some things that backed opportunities for growth, that's one for us.
And if I might, and if I might, that's an opportunity for growth, is potentially when you have an election happening and people are leaving and new people are coming, it's a great opportunity for that mid-year evaluation to have taken place with the sitting board as of December of 2016. Again, it might be something for future reference that as you have people leaving, and perhaps it's something that we should get scheduled in December every year, just regardless of whether there's an election or not.
And I truly agree with you. And I think that was a challenge when changing boards, because the contract actually says I was supposed to get a mid-evaluation, and it didn't happen. So that would have been an opportunity for us to say, hey, Tracy, this doesn't look so great. We need you to work on this. But you don't hear it to the end. And we don't treat children that way. We don't treat teachers that way. And so to be fair, we have to acknowledge that we have to do a better job as a team on that work.
So, Trustee Feenstra.
Oh, yes. I'll say, okay, so given everything I'm hearing, I'm wondering why would we move forward? Because I could tell you, I kept saying to you guys that I thought the questions were unfair. I thought they were flawed. I thought it didn't even relate to the superintendent. I couldn't understand why I couldn't do a 0.5. I just was wondering if you guys had someone working with you who knew statistics, because I knew that piece was missing. I wish we would have had some type of statistician working in conjunction with you guys, because that 1 through 4 is just flawed. And I'm hearing that, what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that they're flaws. Why are we moving forward with even looking at endorsing an minimally effective evaluation? Because that's something I see as being flawed through the numbers, the data.
Let me take that, if I may, then that's when it comes down after we go through the report, and then the board has a discussion on what our next step should be. That's when something like that should be considered. But we should get the results of the report, and then it may be, your recommendation may be don't do anything, and that's okay. It's whatever action we as a board decide to take at that time. So there certainly will be a time for that. Okay, please go ahead.
So I'll just respond to that really quickly. So back to the point I made earlier is we were not at liberty to change any of the tools provided. And the rubric was very clearly, in the handbook, it very clearly states how you were allowed to calculate it. We did have a statistician working with us, actually. But we followed the rules in the handbook. So that there was we were not at liberty to change a thing. So, and I actually asked President Taylor, and she said, no, you cannot do that.
Because the board did it, and we couldn't go outside the vote of the board. So, just as it was stated, it's one of those things, it's nobody's fault.
Right.
It's those are opportunities for us to get better and look at some things, and then we'll have after we finish going through the report, we'll be able to have a discussion about what do we do, if anything at all.
Well, during my interview, you did say that I could call and make some changes if I wanted to. So that's not clear to me.
No, what they meant was they couldn't make any changes to the process or to the rubric or anything like that, or 0.5, because those things were already laid out. That's what she meant.
You could make changes to your comments to them. I think that's what the offer of making changes was about. I think.
Correct.
Great.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Let's jump into Dimension 2. Karen.
Okay. Dimension 2 is instructional leadership. The two elements are 2A, student achievement results, and 2B, highly effective personnel. The average on this was a 3.1 out of 4. A couple of high points or key points here. The implementation of the Safe and Healthy School Commission. Trustees felt that this was evidence that this is an important focus for the district. And on 2B, that regarding the national teacher shortage, that Superintendent Davis is, in the recruitment of teachers here with the national teacher shortage, that we're doing, the district is doing what they can, recruitment trips and conferences and recruiting all over the nation, trying to develop UNR students to be teachers, the program that's at Hug High School. These were all examples that were given to support that statement.
And from the staff and community perspective, the dimension average is also 2.63 out of 5, as was the previous dimension. The summary question was about communicating high expectations for all students to achieve academic success. You can see the segments there. Some areas of excellence, the focus on students and working on improving graduation rates. Again, consistent themes. Differently from what the board said, there was some frustration with low recruitment and retention efforts, and not speaking with and engaging teachers, again, people's perceptions, feeling disconnected from staff and schools. And so we'll see some consistent themes from the feedback that are communication opportunities with an organization as large as this district is. So again, pointing out agreed upon evidence examples, citing the high points here, signature academies, the Nevada academic content standards, school safety and bullying. I'm skipping the stuff we already talked about. The hiring process, diversity of staff, retention, professional growth, a comprehensive professional development plan, and embedding cultural competency. So again, these were the points that Superintendent Davis was making previously about what good looks like in this area. And with that, we'll pass it back to Superintendent Davis.
Thank you. So some activities that we already have in motion is looking at subgroup populations and focus on growth. And we know that that's pre-K through 12. Of course, also looking at our graduation rates and looking at our targets. We have the acceleration zone, what we do with our MyPGS, many opportunities around recruitment, what we teach, ARL and Grow Your Own programs for growth for the teacher pipeline. Our Zoom and Victory schools, career pathways for students, TMCCU and our partnership, dual credit options for students, and addressing the salary schedule, which was one of the biggest things we've done because Washoe County was one of the lowest as you look at Nevada as a whole. Opportunities for growth. Focus on equity and access efforts because part of it we believe is an access issue. Not that we don't deliver information, but just like the Friday Minute, we have a rate of 23%, but you probably got to be a teacher or have a computer on your desk to see that. So if you're a bus driver, what does that look like? Employee communication on job retention and recruitment efforts, and an emphasis on student English language exit rates. Some of the challenges around this domain would be state funding because grants are competitive versus formula driven. Minority recruitment in Truckee Meadows, some of the themes that we've seen from the board and from the survey was around teacher recruitment and some of it around minority recruitment. But we have to be honest. I work with people from Microsoft here, and there's a challenge. So there's the recruitment, and then there's the retention. And across Reno, there's a challenge with retaining minorities. They come a year and they leave, and I've talked to people outside of education, and they struggle in this community with the same things we do. So we have to look at that as a community level. And I think some good ideas might come. I know Trustee Simon Holland, we talked about some meetings with other entities and kind of glean and see what do we see, what are those things that we can see as a team in Reno. The housing market, we have had rich discussions around this. I'm on the chamber board. That becomes a problem because a teacher's salary, you can't buy a house here. And so if you're going to go to Texas and make $60,000 to live and you can buy a house for $200,000, the mean price for a house in Reno is $350,000. So that's one of the challenges. And I speak again about community efforts to address the diversity. I also included some slides because it goes back to myth versus reality, and I just kind of wanted to share some numbers with you. As you look at this first chart, you'll see on the left-hand side the different numbers of postings of job boards. But if you actually look, we've actually went down every year for first day vacancies. And here's the challenge. We have to do a better job of sharing that information. So it's not that we don't have it, but if people don't understand it, then we need to make sure that's shared throughout the organization so people actually know. So that could also, that's part of an opportunity for growth. When you look at increasing the workforce for diversity on the next slide, employee voices, in partnership with the Equity and Diversity Office, connecting with our WCSD employee community to understand the culture and climate they experience, the diverse perspectives and needs, and formulate action plans based on that feedback. So it's just not us. We're getting information and looking how we can do some feedback and form action plans. We teach in partnership with UNR. This program offers dual credit opportunities and the chance to explore careers in education for students. Parallels is a partnership with TMCC offering English language supports to English language learners interested in pursuing education through ARL. The visiting teacher program increases classroom diversity and provides an opportunity for cultural exchange. And when we talk about your Grow Your Own Diversity Scholarship Program, we offer those scholarships to some of our diverse employees to choose a pathway in which that they could teach. I can tell you that we've had discussions, and 2 days ago I was in a meeting with Mark Johnson, and we really talked about how do we do this teacher pipeline. And what we really probably have to look at is how do we funnel more money into the Grow Your Own. We can create the diversity from within. So those are some opportunities that we will continue to look at. I think I need to share with you the ethnicity data, because we have to be honest with ourselves about what we see in our buildings. When you look at the ethnicity data of the Washoe County School District, you can see the breakdown in those numbers. But if you look at the current certified employees, you look at those numbers, and basically over decades, the population of students changed, but the people who service them doesn't change. So we do actually can identify that there's some work that we need to do around trying to diversify our staff. Where we've seen some great gains is when you look at our ethnicity data of the new ARL teachers. So when you look at that and compare to what we have, this is one of those things that if we continue to foster, we will look at how that can improve upon diversity. And then the ethnicity data of new certified employees, you can actually see, if you look at the new ones, we've actually put a dent in trying to diversify the work population. And if you know numbers and statistics, if 90% of your population is one thing, it's hard to move the needle, right? It takes larger numbers. But I think we're doing some good work around that, and we need to continue to do some work around that. Instructional leadership, when we look at ethnicity data, the ethnicity data of the leadership team. So when we look at the leadership team, you can see what that data looks like, and then you can also look and see what the ethnicity data of all administrators look like. So we looked at, okay, here is top down. What does the leadership team look like? What does administrators look like? What does teachers look like? And are there areas for growth? So we're not just talking about diversity recruitment for teachers across the whole span of the organization. And then we also provided a turnover by employee group for you to look at, and you can kind of see those percentages. And part of what we looked at is, people leave, but we're at this momentum where people are reaching retirements. Our own CFO is retiring. And are people leaving because of retirement? What are all those reasons? And then look at the reasons that impose challenges and things that we can improve upon on a district to retain them. We can't fix retirement, but if someone's unhappy in culture and climate, those are things that we can address. Back on you if there's no questions.
Do the trustees have everything that you need to know related to Dimension 2? All right. Moving along to Dimension 3.
There we go. Okay, so Dimension 3 is systemic leadership, and the elements are 3A, systems for managing change, 3B, fiscal management, and the average here was 2.4 out of 4. For systems for managing change, trustees had consensus that Superintendent Davis is very, very knowledgeable about policy and policy governance. In addition to this, in this section, they also felt that she had not managed resources quite as well. Examples, one of them was that there are smaller school programs with large staff and some programs that need personnel that don't have the personnel. With regards to 3B, fiscal management, majority of the trustees felt that they were not given enough time to review the budget properly, nor did they have prior warning about the scale of the budget deficit.
And from a staff and student perspective, the average is 2.65 out of 5. The summary question is, the superintendent exhibits a deep understanding of the school district as a system by defining processes that utilize data for decision making. Again, you can see the breakdown of how the various segments agreed with that statement. Areas of excellence, responders said that data and decisions to support students' best interest was an area of excellence and helping the district reach its achievements. And then congruently with what Karen just mentioned from the trustees' perspective on opportunities for growth, there was a perception that some schools were not provided equal resources to support various initiatives. Another comment that came up in that area was about the low recruitment and retention as well. Moving on from there then, agreed upon evidence examples. Again, I'm just going to highlight the areas that are new because, again, some of these evidence examples were in other dimensions. So in the items under 3A were similar. 3B under fiscal management, Washoe K-12 Education Foundation, the legislative advocating and supporting the legislative platform and developing a multi-year budget. With that, we'll pass it over to Superintendent Davis.
Thanks. For activities in motion, you can see Financial Review Committee of Programs and Positions, Academic Priorities and Alignment to Funding, WC1, the GFOA Best Budget Practices. We actually have already talked about this year, and we have created the budget survey and budget communication as we go out, and we will be bringing that forward to the board and involve the board and the public earlier in the budget process. And I think that's part of what's already in motion, and we've started that work. Opportunities for growth. State school districts collectively advocating for increased student funding. Most of the board members know about that work that I've been doing at the state level. collaborative leadership, and community outreach on funding issues. Some of the challenges, as you know today, I think even the person who got up to talk about the bathrooms didn't understand the difference between the general budget, where that money goes to the books, versus using that money for schools. So we have to do a better job and a continuous job of having community understand and correcting mixed perceptions about the budget. Categorical funding versus more flexible funding, part of what we're trying to advocate for at the legislature. Lack of community interest sometimes in the budget, unless we start talking about laying off people, taking away sports, then we don't get large numbers, right? And we've done many, many budget readings. So how do we continue to engage the community and get more people in for feedback? And of course, this year we were the lowest per pupil rate in the state. The state is the lowest in the country and lowest funded school district, while working to maintain forward progress on graduation rates and state assessments.
Oh, sorry. Trustee Frankel. No, and thank you both. And thank you, Superintendent Davis. I wanted to just clarify, you were going through, and I know you're going through these relatively quickly, and we're going to talk about goals, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you meant and kind of your thinking about when you identified opportunities for growth, collaborative leadership. That's a very broad statement. I just kind of wanted to break that down a little bit. What do you see in that category, in that phrase?
Well, I think we tried it to some degree when the board sent us out and said, hey, let the schools cut, right? That was one example. However, what we learned from that process is that you got to have some rules in place. Otherwise, you got to tell people, no, people break federal laws. We need to explore what that looks like, but also be cognizant that everybody has lots of ideas, but your idea might impact this department. This department might impact this department, because what's important to you is based on what you do. And so we need to look at how we do that better and get input, but still keep it in the line to the strategic plan and the goals, right? There are some good ideas out there, but maybe we're missing. So as we look at, when we talk about building this community survey, that's collaborative. We never had this survey where it goes out in the budget, so this time we're going to have opportunities to use information from the community to come back and say, here's what the community says. So that's one example of collaborative leadership. So I think it looks a lot of different ways, but I think another way, as board members and myself go out into the public, talk about it, right? Like I'm out, you're out, and how do we create more opportunities for us to go over the span of a larger community? Because I think, and this happens to districts across the country, community involvement is not always as high as we need it to be, because the more information we get back, the more informed we can make our decisions.
Any other questions or clarifying points related to Dimension 3? Okay. Move along to Dimension 4.
Okay, we're over halfway there. Dimension 4, collaborative leadership. The elements are 4A, parent and community outreach, and 4B, communications. Average score of 2.9 out of 4. In 4A, as far as parent and community outreach, every board member said that the superintendent is very visible in the community. Examples: serves on boards, visits schools regularly, invites the trustees to go with her, works with the tribal groups, the faith-based groups, the Rotary Club, and I literally could go on and on about the number of places that I was told that she visits and participates in and takes part in. She is also focused on reaching out to the underserved community, as well as has helped target groups for more parent engagement. For 4B, with regards to communication, there was thought there that she needs a more thought out and communication plan as it relates to communicating proactively on district issues. And lastly, WC1 was mentioned as executed and communicated well with the community.
That's not looking too easy to read, but from the staff and community perspective, the dimension average is 2.5 out of 5. The summary question is, overall, the superintendent has displayed strong collaborative leadership throughout the last year, which might have been exhibited in consensus building, articulation of district direction, or in responses to community input. You can see the percent agrees, those that agree, or the level of agreement from the various segments, as we've seen before. Again, the feedback in these areas is really around communication. What obviously is working is the community meetings and forums. That seems to be coming up a lot. And then areas for growth is teachers and staff are not feeling like they're included in input. So that's another side of communication, of course, and again, something to think about as we're thinking about next year. So looking at what agreed upon evidence examples are in this area, again, calling out the stuff we haven't seen before, increasing engagement of parents and number of business partners for schools as part of parent and community outreach. And in the communications area, public recognition of educators and staff for their dedication, passion, and efforts to success, and using the superintendent's entry plan and building blocks of success to create the superintendent's evaluation. Superintendent Davis.
Thank you.
Off. I want to say she really wants us to join her on some of these school visits. She drugged me out to O'Brien today, although I was there before her. And the kids that were in the room, when she came into the room, gave her a standing ovation. Standing ovation. These are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Now, if that happens, you know she's doing something right. I mean, that to me, you can say, put all your half points and all that out in the club. But I saw her in action today. That was absolutely wonderful. She even did the Macarena in one of the classrooms.
Well, what actually happened was they called me to the center of the stage and made me do it by myself to see if I was paying attention. And let's make it clear that I had every hand gesture correct. But that was a treat. Yes, but that was a treat. But what have really been a treat, John, is they have seen you do the Macarena. I know, that's what I'm saying. Of course, school visits, we started with our high school on freshman visits, and it's been such a great opportunity to do a deeper dive into school cultures, and some trustees have been on some of those trips, so they actually see what that is like, and we decided to expand that to the middle schools, and as we continue to do that work, we will continue to integrate elementary schools, and part of that is that we'll talk about the schedule too, so we're really trying to clean the schedule up and try to get to most of our schools and create a rotation so some schools feel left out so that we won't have any schools left out. The association meetings to address employee issues. Going back to when I first became the superintendent, I transitioned what that looked like with the chief HR officer and documented everything. And when they have concerns, they get to determine if we solved them or not, or if they're ongoing. So if there's something that they say, well, we didn't discuss this or you didn't address this issue because that was an issue they had previously, I actually have documentation for each one of those employee groups to show what was done and when it was resolved and pieces like that. Community meetings with the superintendent. We've had some really great meetings lately and a lot of great turnout and people asking lots of good questions. So we're excited about those have seen some upward swing in mobility and people showing up. And Facebook Live and other social media outreach, of course, you all know what that looks like. So that was a great addition from the communications team to be more transparent about our work. So we want to continue that. Our building site, the Friday Minute to employees. One thing I'll say about the Friday Minute to employees, we've really been looking at that Friday Minute, and what we know, as I talked about earlier, there's only a 23% open rate, so we need to talk about equity and access to all employees and what that looks like, because the bus driver might not have a computer, right? So it's not that they don't want to open it, they might not have access. And what does that look like if you're I don't know, in some job where you just don't necessarily have a computer at your desk. So we need to look at what we can do to increase that. Meeting with our Northern Nevada legislatures, meeting with other municipalities, national advocacy for public education. And so many of you have either participated with me or know about some of those things. And I think we're doing a wonderful job and people are citing us as one of the districts to watch across the country. opportunities for growth include explore additional communication opportunities to staff. So we've been working with the communication team to say, how do we eliminate the equity access so everyone's getting information? And also, what other things can we do to continue to improve upon that? Leadership members attend more meetings in place of the superintendent. Clearly in this information, there was a notion that leadership members need to attend more meetings, but I think part of that is a communication issue because leadership team members have taken over some of those duties. Neil himself served on the Boys and Girls Clubs board for me. Girl Scouts, right. Well, when there's like 30 board for me to serve on. So I think we're doing a good job at that. Please don't buy cookies from Neil. Share more personal employee success stories. As you look out, one of the things we're talking about as we look at college and career readiness and think about workforce development. You look at the Friday Minute, we're starting to highlight jobs that are not traditional. So you can actually see those employees. So that's in place. And then, of course, you can see technology access for employees. Challenges, lack of understanding of demands on the superintendent's schedule, right? And it was a great meeting last night at the teacher union, but one teacher, the only constructive criticism was you were in our school and you didn't get to talk to every teacher, right? And I actually remember that day I was at the school because I was with you, Trustee Melina Raymond, and the schedule was so packed. We need you here, and we got to be more cognizant about that schedule and how we give quality time to some of those events. Visibility, not everyone will see the superintendent during a school visit. I mean, it's just not possible to go in every classroom because otherwise I would take the whole schedule out. But that's what part of the Friday Minute is. If you look at the Friday Minute, part of that is I might not get to your classroom, but what's cool is you see your school highlighted and you see, whoa, the superintendent was in the first grade class and she was doing an echo read, or today we did many activities, right? So to share that information outside and do a better job of ensuring that the communication and people have access to that information.
Anything else? Yes. Trustee Frankel.
Thank you. And I think I really appreciate hearing all of the activities in motion, and it's great to hear the direction. One of the things that stood out for me a little bit in this particular section from the survey, and again, I know it's perception, and I appreciate that, and I also know it's a certain subset of participation, but in this particular area, and I'm looking at the report, and it came up a couple of times, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this particular issue. And one of the items that seemed to get a lot of responses in this section was that teachers and staff did not feel that they were included in providing input. And there was another category that talked a little bit about in decision-making involving others.
Right.
And this is on my mind today because I just lived in our teaching and problem-solving decision-making class, and we were just talking about participatory decision-making and problem-solving. So I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on how you understood that. And what your thoughts are
that's
about
a great question because we didn't do a deeper dive. If I'm a school principal and I have autonomy, you might be talking about the decision-making model at the school, right? Or you could be talking about the decision-making model at the district, right? Part of that is we probably need more information because as Natha talked about, I came in and we meet all the time. Even in our conversations, I'm like, Natha, that's a school thing, right? So teachers are upset, right? And then you hear a teacher say, well, that doesn't happen in my school. And so we have to do a deeper dive to see what that looks like and then figure out how do we give our teachers more access to decision making in the schools. But I also think you have to balance that because part of the decisions are driven by NRS, right? Like you don't get to change read by grade 3 and there's things that has to happen. And sometimes, listen, I'm a teacher and I used to teach in Title I and we would get mandated to do something. Was I angry about that mandate? Yes. Did I have a decision? No. Even if I told my principal and she listened to me. So I think we have to do a deeper dive. So we probably need to figure out what does that mean, right? Are we saying we're going to let teachers, and I have to say this and I have to be honest, I think we can't just isolate teachers in the decision-making model. Then we value a different employee. We need to say, how do we include all 8,000 employees in the model? And that's some of the conversation that we're talking about. Yeah.
Angie?
Oh, no, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Eric, I think that's exactly what I stated in my meeting with you, that some of this is on the administrator's part. And I sort of delineated exactly what were some of those areas that you cannot hold the superintendent accountable for, because the principal is the person who runs that school. You're looking at two right here, and I got to tell you, Kristen, you could probably back me up on this. Sometimes your school has to be run according to the dynamics of your population, and if you think Glenn Duncan is going to be run the same way that Marvin Moss is being run, I've got to tell you, you're sadly mistaken. We have to listen to the parents. We have to listen to the needs of the students. We have to know the needs of the students. So you're not going to find every principal running their school the same. And if you are, you're not going to find progress. So that question, that was a question I had. That's why on some of those questions, I just thought they were just worded very unfairly to the superintendent.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we're making some strong assumptions here. I think that the certified staff, the educational support professionals, I mean, they knew this was a superintendent survey, a survey about the superintendent, about her role, what she's doing. And so, yes, I mean, I agree that, maybe a few of them were thinking that decision making was being done, that they weren't part of it, and it possibly could be because of the principal. But it's clearly a superintendent evaluation. I mean, I looked at the surveys. Those were one of the pieces that I really looked at strongly. And one of the things that I just noticed was there were a lot of trends of people that felt left out and people that felt like they weren't being heard. And that's just something that I looked at pretty closely. And I don't know, I feel like to me, what a teacher feels, I mean, if 18% of certified staff feel that, overall the superintendent has displayed strong collaborative leadership, 18%, to me, that seems so low. And I just don't think that we should assume that they didn't know what the survey was for or what it was about. I mean, I didn't think that way.
I'm saying I didn't know it. I didn't understand. I wasn't speaking on teachers. I said myself.
You want to use your mic on, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was speaking on my behalf. And I said, as a principal, I could assure you that this is the job of a principal. And site principals are going to be different in their leadership styles. They're supposed to be. If not, they don't need the position. I got to tell you, if you think that you're going to have the same principal be as effective as the principal at Ted Huntsberger, I think that's the highest rated school, am I correct?
Collin Ranch right now.
Collin
100 points.
Sorry, Scott, but okay. You look at they're looking at their clientele, and they're hiring teachers according to their clientele. They're doing activities according to their clientele. Anything that's done is done based on the needs of that community. That is so important. So I think I did read the survey right. I don't know about teachers.
So can I just say it's intricate, right? Like, depending on your vantage point and what you think it means versus what we believe it to be. So here's a great example. And I think what we've said is we need to do a better job of communicating out to all employees, right? Like, no matter what vantage point, we just need to do a better job. But we look in the survey, right? And it is about the superintendent, but really it's about the district, right? If there's information that I send out and a principal doesn't send it out, or any department, right, and they don't get it, well, it's not that I didn't send it out. Maybe they didn't get it, right? And so we have to look at a variety of things. And likewise, there might be people who say, hey, yeah, we weren't involved in this decision, and how could we be a part? And then we need more people to show up. I can tell you that this year already we had 2 teacher meetings for teachers to just come and do conversation corners. And we have to have a discussion around opportunity versus who show up, right? Because we did them at different times. We did them late, we whatever. And total, we had 5 teachers show up. But here's the great news. We're going to continue to do those meetings, and we're going to include support staff and everybody else, right? And so I think it will address both of your issues.
Okay, so just thinking about this, we're going to continue to toggle back and forth between this is the superintendent evaluation process, but there's a lot of information in here that is more broadly about the district, and we did, just to again preempt that, we met with Superintendent Davis's staff and said, what can we learn from this survey that's much broader than just for this evaluation process. The purpose is for this evaluation process, but we'll get more legs out of it than just that for sure. So, anything else on Dimension 4? All right, let's move on to Dimension 5.
Okay, so Dimension 5 is board relationships and professional ethics. The two elements were 5A, professional ethics, and 5B, board relationships. The average score here was 3 out of 4. In 5A for professional ethics, the superintendent was identified as acting with honesty, integrity, fairness, and with respect. She was also identified as creating a culture of fear. Examples were fear of retribution, fear of losing their jobs, and feeling of being talked at. In 5B, the superintendent was identified as being responsive and having good interactions with the board.
From the staff and community perspective, the Dimension average was 2.72 out of 5. The question is, overall, there is no doubt the superintendent models an uncompromising ethical system with moral leadership, and you can see the various agrees by segment of respondents. Areas of excellence, behavior at meetings, open, supportive, and professional, and open and honest during the current budget crisis. In congruency with what Karen mentioned from the trustees' perspective, creating a negative culture, fear of retribution, perception of that was an area for growth, and the tone of the messaging to the public around the budget crisis was another area for growth. Some agreed upon evidence examples. The only new one on here is under board relationships, board governance work sessions. The other ones we have seen before. Superintendent Davis.
Yep. So I put activities in motion, one-on-one trustee meetings with the superintendent, and I'm proud to say finally all trustees are participating in that opportunity. Weekly board of trustees communication from the superintendent goes out on Fridays, response to board questions and needs, more information provided around legislative updates, school visits with board and superintendent together, and then AASA Superintendent Academy, best practices for superintendent and professional growth for the superintendent. Opportunities for growth, more timely evidence through the year for any mid-course corrections when identified to the superintendent. Cultural competency training for the team, which would include me and the board. More team presence at events and functions, and I think that we are doing that a lot more now. Continue team building and the governance work. And board speaks with unity with the superintendent on one voice on all ideas that we agree to or the board approves as a majority. Challenges would include collaboration needs to go both ways in order to be an effective team. While I know I have to own my part in the collaboration, I cannot collaborate by myself if it's going to be effective. It's a two-way street. 8 different personalities. I'm part of the personalities. And everybody kind of has a different expectation. Everybody has to figure out what it is, and you kind of figure that out. And I think we've done a good job at this point kind of figuring that out, but that's still an area for us to grow. I still believe that there is a need for team building and professional development, which would include culturally responsive practices and looking at what that looks like through equity and diversity, a lens of equity and diversity.
Trustee Mayor.
You know, we lost some of our audience, and I just looked back there. Former trustee Ruggiero said you didn't get enough of this during your term in office, huh? See that? See her sitting back there?
Is there anything else the trustees would like to know about Dimension 5 before we move on? All right, Dimension 6, organizational leadership.
So the two elements are 6A, distributive leadership. In this one there's 3. 6B, acknowledges failures, celebrates accomplishments, and 6C is advocacy and empowerment. In this scoring, there was an average of 2.2 of 4. There was consensus that Superintendent Davis celebrates accomplishments. Examples were Spotlight on Success, the rally at McQueen for the highest graduation rate, She talks about successes at board meetings and in the weekly newsletter. Does not acknowledge failures as well as accomplishment, was identified as being defensive at times in responses to negative feedback. And in 6C, Advocacy and Empowerment, it was identified that there is a lack of trust with the superintendent relating to staff, community, and the board based on people having a sense of unease and not feeling valued.
From the staff and community perspective, the dimension average is 2.44 out of 5. Overall, the superintendent demonstrates an effective understanding of all people in the district. You can see the percent agrees across the spectrum there. Areas of excellence on and the areas for growth are one and the same, speaking with teachers about their achievements, and then conversely, quite a bit more folks commenting on wanting more recognition of and visiting with and soliciting feedback from teachers. So recurring theme on that piece. And the area for growth is the perception that the district leadership is too top-heavy. Looking at the agreed upon evidence examples, calling out the new ones on here under distributed leadership, the leadership team. All the items under acknowledging failures, celebrating accomplishments are new evidence points here. Leading, teach, learn meeting, school overcrowding management plans, conversation corners, 90 by 20, public comment cards, and then under efficacy and empowerment, the climate survey, staff retention, employee recognition programs, spotlight on success, and TBA. Superintendent Davis.
Thank you. Activity in motion, the leadership team has already been developed through a coaching and professional. I did a John on everybody. Sorry about that. It's getting late. I'm getting hungry. We've, since the beginning of the year, the leadership team, we have employed a coach to coach us as a team, and we have professional development, which is as a group and individually, and so far that has been working for us. Delegation to the leadership team around WC1 school visits and events. Those are things that we're trying to do more of, and you'll see some of that come out when we start talking about town halls, budget meetings, how we share some of that. Opportunities for growth include solicit more employee input. And we have to see what that looks like, but we know that that's a common theme, so we have to work on that. Potential regional employee meetings at school. We've worked with communications and looked at, can we do 3 or 4 of those throughout the year somewhere where anyone, it's not just teachers, if you're a bus driver, come and speak your thoughts and have an opportunity to talk to the superintendent and the leadership team. Work on climate initiatives. Increase in having teachers represented on committees. So where we know we have principals, but sometimes we don't have support staff and others on higher and district and state and school committees. So how do we continue for opportunities when it's appropriate to increase that? The challenge is there's always going to be a misperception of being administratively top heavy. We've sent out tons of information and compared it across the state, but we need to keep working on that. Competing priorities, and sometimes those priorities are driven by NRS. And so how do we balance that? I know you heard Matha talk about the plates are getting full, but we also have to acknowledge as superintendent, I haven't started one new initiative. So if the plates are getting full, how does that happen? And part of that is subjective to what happens in the individual school. Sometimes schools have their own initiatives that they do because they believe that's important. And so we have to really do a deeper dive to see what that looks like. And change is not easy for some employees, as we talk about moving the district forward, and how do we balance that and manage that not only as a superintendent, as a team. And, you know, honestly, as an organization, we looked at social emotional learning and we value social emotional learning and we know the benefits of it. And as an organization, we believe that everybody should be trained. I think we have to look at cultural competencies, right? And look at the value of that for a district. We heard a moving statement today, and whether we agree or disagree, we know that we can all benefit from some of that training, and not just us. Maybe that's something organizationally we need to look at and see how we work with our equity and diversity department to move that forward.
Questions or comments on Dimension 6? Okay, so we'll close with just a couple slides, and then And we'll pass it back to President Taylor. Sorry, may I help you out?
All right. So this is the evaluation summary with an average of all the trustee scores, which also include an average of each dimension. The preliminary composite score is based on the trustee's overall average, which is 2.67.
And let's just wrap up this piece of it with recommendations for the future, and then we'll jump into the conversation about the evaluation. So you saw the items on the left-hand side earlier in our presentation, so the items on the right-hand side are our recommendations, a few of them anyways, the big ones, to consider improvements to this process. And making those improvements need to happen now, of course, in the context of the current evaluation year. So I'm stating the obvious, but the year gets away from us. So fully articulate the process in the handbook. The handbook we used as our, as you know quite well, that was the guide that was the guide and the policy that we adhere to. So so the evaluation handbook needs to reflect what is the policy for the evaluation. Possibly consider using the same scale for the survey and the rubric. You know, there's some trade-offs with that, so I don't think that's a big point right now, but there's points of confusion there. It's hard to compare the information a little bit, so something to consider. There was positive feedback about the overall outreach. It was more inclusive than last year, and so given the way that we broke down the data, that helps us see what we need to see from the staff and look across the spectrum of employees. Certainly a higher response rate from community would be nice, but you know, we did the full court press. So Karen.
So there's been a lot of discussion around the rubric. And one of the things that I think that would be, we think that would be helpful is to analyze the rubric for relevancy to the superintendent's position. In addition, the progression from one rating to the next needs to be looked at. There were some alignment issues, and those disconnects made it difficult at times for trustees to be able to determine whether they were moving up or they were moving down or what the box they were checking. So, and then once the rubric has been reevaluated with those two ideas, the relevancy and the progression, that the trustees should be allowed an opportunity to have a training and a conversation around the rubric and what's entailed of their position as supervisors to the superintendent to evaluate them, to evaluate a superintendent. And I believe that with some of those changes that would help a more effective outcome of an evaluation. In addition, the evidence that is agreed upon, as Eric already stated, needs to be quantifiable and measurable so that we know what we're actually rating against. And then most importantly, lastly, that the goals would align, that there would be goals that were written and approved and that they would align with the strategic plan, in addition to the superintendent having an opportunity to make some individual leadership goals as well, which is hopefully what's going to occur at this moment in time. And
yeah, so a suggestion I might make, and we can see where we want to go with this, is there's a need to talk about this evaluation specifically and what we want to do with it, and then move in the conversation into goal setting. So President Taylor, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks to the both of you and your organizations, your teams that are behind you, HRC and On Strategy for your guidance, your assistance, your help, your expertise in this process. We really appreciate it. It turned into a little more of a process than any of us thought, and we certainly ran into some challenges that we didn't know existed. But part of your expertise helped us to identify some of those, and allowed us to move forward. So why don't we do this? Do we have any more public comment? Why don't we have that at this point, and then we'll bring it to the board table.
Trustee Feimster has something she would like to read into the record during public comment.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, this is from Delisa Crane, who is the administrator for the Family School Partnership. She's unable to be here, and she'd like me to read this. I wanted to share my thoughts on Superintendent Davis with you. I've worked on family engagement in Washoe County School District for 14 years and have served under the leadership of 5 different superintendents in our school district. I've witnessed many different stump speeches on the importance of family engagement, but in the past have not always seen the true support that makes the rubber hit the road in connecting with our families and supporting our teachers and schools to do this important work. A large portion of the success of a district's family engagement work is to address difficult conversations such as equity and discrimination. Many of our families that need support navigating the system and supporting their children's education are often our families that live in poverty, have a child with a disability, or families of color. I want to share with you that Superintendent Davis does not shy away from these conversations. These difficult discussions often leave educators uncomfortable, but we must continue to support every staff member in addressing their biases in order to have more authentic partnerships with families that lead to high expectations for every child. Superintendent Davis makes time to meet face-to-face with families at our parent university classes. She schedules time for home visits and supports other communities across the nation to move their home visit efforts forward. As you may know, we recently had 50 representatives here this past Monday and Tuesday from 25 different school districts across the nation. They were extremely complimentary of our collaborative and systemic work on family engagement under Superintendent Davis's leadership. There have been times when my department made mistakes. Instead of focusing on the mistakes, Superintendent Davis stood behind the work and focused on what is best for students and families. This was not always the case with past superintendents. If we ruffled feathers in the community because we were addressing hard issues, my experience with other superintendents was that they stepped away from those hard issues. As a staff member and a parent of 2 children in Washoe County School District, I appreciate the real work that our superintendent is doing to lift up our marginalized communities and truly support every child in our district to be successful. Again, that's from Delisa Crane, our Washoe County School District Department of Family School Partnerships.
Thank you, Dr. Feimster. Do we have other public comment, Ms. Batchelder?
We do.
Please.
Jesse Ruzicka.
Jesse Ruzicka still here by chance? Jesse may have given up on us.
Mine have.
Okay, well,
Monica Miller.
Miss Miller left with Jesse. Let's start the rumor. Sorry, off the record. We don't know where they are. They just aren't here.
Michael Randall.
No. Mr. Randall, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So good to see you all. I am standing representing the African American Clergy Council, which is a body that I was part of the organizing of that body, as well as now am co-chair to that body, and appreciating the opportunity. As I said, I'm focused on a lot that I've seen and experienced as a community leader, as a pastor, as a not-for-profit developer, and I'm just at awe at the level of intense work that this has to be for everyone involved. Evaluations are tough. It's an evaluation that led me to decide to leave my vocation to step into my personal calling, because I got tired of the fact that in evaluations there's always facts versus emotions, and you just can't take them out, because whenever I approach an evaluation, my emotion keeps wrestling with what I feel, and there's not always what about the facts. So I'm caught up in that. Now, I thought about this in relation to goals. You all were calling them evidences, those little things that you got to try to present, those things you present. I never forget this scenario. A little girl told her daddy, "Daddy, watch me jump from my bed into your arms." Now, Daddy didn't really pay attention to it until after it was done. She jumped off of her bed into his arms, and he said, "Baby, you did it." I hope y'all got that. That's what a goal is. When you set it, you have a marker, and if you get to it, then you've done what you said you would do A+. The problem is that goals are often mystical and mysterious when you're coming to public leadership, school business, because it's hard to measure everything. And you don't know if you've actually measured it the right way. So for me, in support of this board, most especially in support of Tracy, I just want to say you all have had to do a good job, but it's a tough job. And when you're focusing on it, don't forget how tough it is, but be fair. I wouldn't want Tracy's job. I wouldn't want Angie's job. I wouldn't even want y'all's job, and I wouldn't want your job. So that's why I went out and got my own job. But don't forget, she's not a number, y'all.
Thank you, Pastor Randall. Job security for all of the rest of us, everybody. Job security.
Gwen Taylor.
I can't call you Gwen. This is my pastor's wife. So, Sister Taylor, welcome. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
All right. I'm so glad to be here in support of Tracy Davis. She's made a very big impact in this community, and I am just appalled at how the board could rank her so low in some of these categories. I don't know whether you're looking at her, and I heard this one part, she was it aggressive or assertive? I mean, there's research done on black women that because they are in a position of power, people of other ethnicities see them as aggressive or assertive or an overkill. So I want the board to really take a look at yourself to see if you are ranking her with a rank that is fair. Or are you ranking her because you don't know what she did? Because some of y'all are new. So I really hope you will go deep down inside of yourself. And why would somebody give her a 1 in a category where she is outstanding? I don't understand it. Now, this lady, what's her name? Miss Holland, she admitted she didn't know a lot of this stuff. So I really think that you guys should have sat down with the old board and figured out what they told her to do. And now you guys are ranking her on something different. That's not fair. That is utterly not fair. And I would hope you would just dig deep and say, why the heck, if this woman is out in the community all the time, she needs a deputy superintendent. When Mr. Martinez was here, she was doing half his job. And now she's doing his job and her job, and you guys are giving her 1 and 2s. I think that is utterly ridiculous. I'm very passionate. And I also teach at Glen Duncan Elementary School on the Team Up program, and they love Miss Davis. She's around. I don't know how she do it. She probably only sleeps 2 hours a night. So I really want the board to dig deep. I think you used something, I love that word. I can't remember what you used, but I'll remember it. Go deeper. I think you said something in that regard. Go deeper in really how you evaluated this mighty, mighty woman that is out in the community. The kids love her. This man knows. John went out. Have you guys gone out with her to other schools to see how people love her? So how the heck can you give her a 1 or a 2 when she's doing the work of 2 or 3 people? She needs help. She needs support. And you guys need to go to her. If you think she's aggressive or if you think she's this or she's that, you need to talk to her. You can't just sit down and talk among yourselves about her. There has to be some clear communication. And I really appreciate what she's done in this community. I appreciate how the graduation rates have gone up. I appreciate her tenacity to stay here in this town and put up with so much stuff. She's strong. And I appreciate you, Tracy. And I hope you don't go nowhere because we need you.
Thank you, Sister Taylor. No relationship, by the way. No. Yes. Well, people think that all the time. It's not a bad thing.
So I have 2 people who've requested that items be read into the record.
Okay.
The first is from Mr. Nathan Dupree. Greetings, President Taylor and the Washoe County School District Trustee Board. For the record, my name is Nathan Dupree. I wear several hats in this community. I am a proud graduate of Worcester High School. I'm the Executive Director of 360 Blueprint. I'm very involved with the City of Reno in various capacities, and I'm a very involved and engaged citizen of our community. However, today I stand before as the president of ACON, and as many of you know in this room, we have supported the work of the Board of Trustees and the Superintendent for the past years. We have been delighted to see the gains made over the past 4 years with Superintendent Davis. On a personal note, when 360 Blueprint was getting no traction, she stepped in and got the ball rolling because she supported community policing and building relationships. Specifically, the hard work done to engage many communities that have been disengaged from the Washoe County School District. When her predecessor needed replacing, she stepped in and began to work for our kids and this community, no questions asked. Why? Because she is all about the kids. That's important. Why it is important? Because when you know the core value of why someone does what they do, they can fill in the blanks about so many other unknowns about a person. So even though we're skeptical about her being here for a period of time, she's here and she's done the work. So of course we are, as an organization, incredibly interested in her assessment and evaluation as our superintendent, because our organization is in place to hold individuals and organizations and entities accountable with our voice and our actions. ACON is very familiar with this community. We understand the history and the current climate of this community. So when we read the evaluation, I think for the most part we are disappointed and saddened by the unchanging conditions. We were here some time ago fighting to be heard and for change that we believe would impact our community. So when we saw the evaluation and what appears to be an evaluation that does not equal the many outcomes we have seen in our school district and community. So you shouldn't be surprised that many people in the community are concerned by the proposed rating of minimally effective, considering her predecessor achieved far less and yet received significantly higher ratings. That is of great concern to many of us in the community, as we know the history of Reno. Beyond the work to get WC1 passed and continuous student achievement, this community has seen gains in parent engagement and the expansion of Parent-School Partnership Office, increased support for English language students, a focus on special education students, and that alone has historically been an issue with many parents in the district that no superintendent before addressed in a deliberate way. This is just to name a few. So why would you be giving the superintendent an evaluation that does not reflect the work? That alone is disheartening to all the people that know the truth about her work. Additionally, for trustees, giving her 1, was the superintendent notified of deficiencies during her March-April mid-course evaluation as outlined in her contract? I have searched previous board meetings and can find no evidence of this happening. Simply asked, did she receive a mid-course evaluation as outlined in her contract? If she did not receive this feedback from the board, it seems disingenuous of any trustee to give a score less than 2 in any area. Why would she not receive credit for areas in which she was distinguished, sometimes reverting back to approaches? That's a system that sets out Superintendent Davis up for failure, especially if some board members have ulterior motives based on implicit bias. Finally, if in this process any board member shows evidence of 3 and 4, how could it be that the superintendent received 1 in such domain? Because the facilitator would have evaluation to match the rubric? Not only is this process truly flawed, it clearly lends itself for the individual to rate the superintendent on their personal feelings and not the work being done. So as a community, we ask you graciously to rate our superintendent of the work she has done. Anything less would call into question the actions of this board and misrepresent the work that has been done. Nathan Dupree. The second item is from Pastor Otto Kelly. Dear esteemed board members, thank you very much for allowing me the privilege to address you. I must confess I could not live in good conscience if I did not voice my opinion. I'm under the extreme conviction that Superintendent Tracy Davis is responsible for a great many things. I ponder at times if she is not overtasked. I have the honor of sitting on several active boards with her, one of which is the Children's Cabinet. Although she does not make every meeting, however, when present, her insight and input are consistently timely, reliable, formidable, and compassionate. She has worked diligently with me as a pastor and with the faith-based community to create and address the needs, among other things, of minority males, which has never been done before on a consistent basis until now. As many of you may know, that I am one of the lead pastors with the Parabola de Vida Word of Life Ministries under Dr. Cesar Manera. We were delighted seeing her sing songs in Spanish at one of our services. We, as a congregation, are and have been actively involved in race symposiums, police and community forums, and civic community meetings. Superintendent Davis somehow seems to show her support, knowing full well that these interaction forums will affect the over 64,000 students that she is called to serve. Like myself, she attempts to be active in many areas of our community. I have been in this community for over 36 years and have served in a juvenile service capacity most of those years. While I have enjoyed and learned from previous superintendents, it is abundantly clear that she is student first. It seems from her that there is a high expectation from her to our 64,000 students. We all should have such a belief in our young. As a longtime resident, I have seen many changes. I comprehend and understand that there are flaws in our current process. However, you have the responsibility to fix this. Many wonderful and monumental strides have taken place under Superintendent Davis's watch, and I am excited and look forward to actively participating in this process with her. I know that each of us loves our kids and our community. I believe that Tracy Davis is the right person to lead this charge. I know that each of you desires that she has great success, for we all win as a result. Most importantly, our young. Respectfully, Pastor Otto Kelly.
Thank you, Ms. Batchelder. Do we have any other public comment? Do you have any more cards? Has anyone been overlooked? There's one coming forward now. And we'll just ask that
Yes.
a comment card be, okay, please,
So
and
this
identify
is
yourself for
a
the record.
statement from on behalf of Araceli Martinez, who is the interim director for the UNR Center for Student Diversity, and she asked me to read this on her behalf. It says, I appreciate that she has been a superintendent that has been willing to reach out to the community and listens, whether she agrees with our comments and suggestions. I appreciate the opportunity to voice my concerns and speak on behalf of family and community that are not been able to be as involved. She's texting more, but I don't know if I can continue.
Well, you have 2 minutes and 45. Tell her to hurry. Get real time, huh?
This is technology.
It is.
I'll give it 2 seconds. If it doesn't come true, this is the statement that
Okay,
she
you
has
have 2
provided.
minutes and 23 seconds.
That's all she submitted.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank her. Has anyone else been overlooked? No? Okay, we'll bring the discussion back here to the board, and just for the record, this is just a motion to either accept or not accept, or whatever the heck we want to do. The board can do whatever we want to, so it isn't for the evaluation report that was completed by On Strategy and HRC, and they're still here if there are questions as we have board discussion as well. Trustee Mayor?
Yes. I move that the Board of Trustees approve the evaluation of Superintendent Davis with a rating of accomplished for the 2016-17 school year.
Okay, it has been moved, that has been moved by Trustee Mayor and seconded by Dr. Feemster, that the evaluation be approved with a rating of accomplished, and we'll open it up for discussion. We haven't had board discussion yet, so this will be the time certainly to do that. Discussions on anything relating to the evaluation. Thank you for putting the summary back up. If there are questions for On Strategy or HRC, we can take those at this time as well. Sure. Vice President Simon Holland.
It's not, there we go. Okay, there it goes. I am a bit confused about the motion because I thought the motion was to accept the report. And so I'm comfortable accepting the report, and if there are more comments required, I can certainly do that.
Ask if the motion is appropriate or out of order then? Is that the questioning?
I don't think it's inappropriate, but I think that the action that at least I understood was to accept. That's what I read on the.
Or not accept.
Yeah, to accept or not accept. So I'm just confused by the motion.
No, let's make sure we get some clarity. Mr. Rombardo, if you would.
What was what was the motion again?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the evaluation.
Okay.
Let's get that back on the record.
I just want to make sure I got it correct on the record. So you're saying approve as opposed to accept?
And
with the rating
label
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the agenda properly contemplates that type of action. I don't see acceptance and approval as different. I guess they could accept, you as a board can accept the draft report any way you want. If you want to change it, you can choose to change it if that's what the board wants to do. I don't see. So what the open meeting law contemplates is that the action is reasonably related to the item on the agenda. You're not so restricted to the point where you have to do it exactly as written. So I would say that was reasonable.
Did that answer your question, Trustee Simon Holland?
It does answer my question, and I guess from my perspective, similar to Trustee Feemster's concerns with the rubric and the language, is it required that we put a label that is one of those four labels on the motion and the acceptance of the report?
Okay. Is that a requirement? Is that so?
Well, I have a green light too.
What are you doing? John,
if their mics weren't on, it might free up more.
You're overloading the system. Yeah.
We'll get it. Well, I don't think the label is required, but if the board chooses to adopt the label, it would be, again, you need a quorum. We have a quorum here, so you would need a full vote of the board, or not a full vote, but 4 members would have to carry the action.
Well, it's not required.
So it's not, but it's not required to answer the question.
Okay.
And just to clarify, is it required by the evaluation process as adopted by the board that the evaluation cumulatively conclude with a label that is a word from the rubric?
I don't believe so. Yeah, I don't believe so. I mean, this is only our second time around at this, but I don't recall seeing anything that says it has to be this and it has to have a label. I mean, it did before, but I don't think anything says it has to. Yes, Trustee Kelly.
And then, so the second part of the motion was to move the to have the preliminary composite score go from 2.67 up to 2.8? No?
My motion is I move that the Board of Trustees approve the evaluation of Superintendent Davis with a rating of accomplished for the 2016-17 school year. There was no recommendation of a score. And in my opinion, she deserves to be accomplished. And it's there. That's my motion. I stand by it.
Okay, the motion was made and second. This is discussion time on the motion. Other comments, discussion from the board? Sure, certainly.
So I actually have a question for legal. If they accept the report as is without anything, technically, if I apply for a job, I have to tell somebody I was minimally effective. Because if I show that, no, I mean, there needs to be clarity about what that means. Because we agreed upon something. I'm getting confused.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
So if I understand the question correctly, if it was adopted as is, so the 2.67, which is emerging, is that what you're asking? Then, and this is a public record, an employer asks if you were to apply for another job.
Then I'm emerging, correct?
I mean.
Okay, I just think we need to be clear about what that means, accepting that report without John's recommendation of making it say approaches. Accomplished or.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Davis. I see Dr. Finkster and then
Well,
Trustee.
I just wanted to mention that I did put in a call to Karen to change some of my scores, and even if one of them had been changed to what I had requested, only because I thought about it really hard and I knew I was right on some of these issues, you would have the 2.88 or whatever it is that you need for accomplished. So.
Let me take that one. The conversation that we had is that, and I made that call to everyone, things are going to be finalized and so on. So if anyone has any afterthoughts and yada, yada, yada. But we decided at that point, it was so late in the process, some information had leaked out, and to keep everything above board, any changes that would have to happen here at the board meeting. And so that's why any of those calls. But just for the record, mathematically, it would have taken quite a few changes to make any kind of movement from one level to the other. Anyway, it would have taken quite a few steps up, not just a few. But that was a decision that I made because it needed to be fair. It needed to be fair. It needed to be open, and that was the best way. That was the best way to do that. I mean, anything can happen now, but it would need to be done here. Trustee Raymond.
Can I just generally discuss in this discussion period? I wanted to thank both Karen and Erica. I enjoyed Karen, the interview process. I thought you really made it easy, and as a new trustee and new to this type of evaluation, I appreciated the support that you gave me during the time of the interview and helping me with the rubric and through all of that. So thank you. And I felt that the information was clear, as I was working on it, but I do, as I think some of the other trustees have stated, I do see much room for improvement in the rubric and the way that it works, and I found it frustrating at times to be confined to the way that the answers are structured, and I think, as Superintendent Davis has pointed out, there were maybe areas of conversation with previous trustees about how to rate things that I wasn't aware of, or if I had been told them, I forgot in the process. So, and I think, sorry. I'm going to take a break.
Okay, Trustee Kelly wanted to chime in, so please do.
Well, and again, the motion, I can't support the motion only because I don't want to change my scores. I mean, the scores that I have up there, and I know we're supposed to keep it anonymous, but I'm happy with my scores. I think my scores are good and fair based on a ton of evidence. And so that's why So I don't want my score to change. However, I would, if a trustee wanted to change their own scores, I would be totally fine with that, and then that could bring it up to 2.8 or higher. And so I'm just not sure, like, how can we do that? How can we, if the motion is that we just bump the scores up, but I don't want to change my scores, like, I'm not sure how to do that. And so it's for that confusion that I can't support the motion until until it's clear.
I mean, I think according to what we got from legal counsel, are you responding to what he said?
Well, I have a suggestion, but go ahead.
Okay, let me just respond to that, and then please. According to what we got from legal counsel, the board can do whatever we wanted to with the report. So just as you said, individual trustees could certainly change a score or two. Which, if we got into changing scores, well, I have to say then it wouldn't be finalized tonight, because then everything has to be recomputed and so on. So individual score changing, because again, there would have to be like 10 or more, right? I mean, you're the statistician, right, Howard? Yeah. So there'd have to be quite a few score changes, and then and to do it right. And I know Erica's cringing right now, hoping I don't say it can be done here. To do it right, I'm not going to do that to you. Don't worry. We really would have to delay a final numeration to make sure it's done right and appropriately. So it wouldn't end here just for that. It's certainly possible, but just know the ramifications of that would cause a delay. I know Vice President Simon Holland, you wanted something, and let me know when you're ready, and I have a couple comments.
Yeah, if you want to jump in, just holler. I also think that the process, when it yields something that is a number to the hundredths of digits, does not accurately represent a person's year of work. And for that reason, I would eliminate the numbers that say overall range. I would even eliminate the 2.67. The trustees have made the recommendations that they've made about how the scores occur on the rubric that we were given, and I don't think that I would eliminate the composite score and the overall range being related to any completely subjective label. I don't think those labels are helpful, and like the superintendent, I have been through the process of having my evaluation conducted on the public arena, and I have had my evaluation used in the public arena when I looked for another job, and had a person who was hiring me say, well, one person said a bad thing about you on that public evaluation, and no one else who's going for that job has had to have a public evaluation. So I'm very sensitive to that. But I would just take out the preliminary composite score, the overall range, and those labels that relate to something that implies a mathematical precision that is just not there. So if that's possible to do, I don't know, but that would be my suggestion, to accept the report because it is a fair representation of the information that you received, and to not put labels on it, and to eliminate that information from the record of the meeting as a result.
Thank you, Vice President Simon Holland. Trustee Murray, you ready yet, or should I go? Go ahead. You sure? No, I want you. When you're ready, I want you to jump in. It's like double dutch. You got to get in there when you're ready. Okay, well, no, I was waiting. Hey! I'm in line. I'm in line after her.
I wanted to acknowledge that I think we as a whole group, based on the evidence today, see the important work that Superintendent Davis is doing in the community with all populations of people. And any sense that that is not valued by us, just is hard as a trustee when we do support that work. I think all of us very strongly. So I just want everyone to know that from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Raymond. You got through it. It's okay. You got through it. I do have those tissues. Thank you. And yes, we're certainly all tired. I have a couple of comments, then we'll go to you, Trustee Frankel. I think very good. I told him, I said, I think we're going to have a little bit of a robust conversation, and I think that's a good thing. in terms of thinking of different ways and opportunities to go. I have a couple of comments. We've learned more, even almost to the hour today before we showed up today, about ways to improve the rubric and challenges that we had with it, and still talking about some things over the break, and that's part of what made this process, I know, so challenging for our consultant team, certainly, and then for us. My challenges in and of itself is really those challenges overall. Things weren't progressive from the boxes standpoint, and that was certainly, let's make it very, very clear, not the fault of the consultants. They got the tool. We can't change any rules. Do it. I mean, that's basically and they did the best job that they could with it. And again, thank you.
Thank you for stating that again.
Yes, thank you. No, it's really important. I mean, you've been great partners, and I've said that many times, and now I've said that on the record. The second challenge I have with it is you talked about it, but I want to explain this a little bit more. As you look at distinguish, accomplish, emerging, and developing, we went across the grid, and if under developing there were 3 boxes, and let's say all 3 of those boxes were checked because those were happening, and then you could go over to emerging, and then let's say those 3 boxes were checked, and then you can go over to accomplished, and only 2 of those 3 boxes were checked, or maybe only 1 of those boxes were checked, and then you go over to distinguished, and 1 of those were checked. You had to default all the way back to emerging, because those were the rules. And what that did is it doesn't allow any consideration for the work that was done in those boxes that were valued a little bit higher. So it didn't allow consideration for, the boxer tool, whatever that was checked and accomplished, or the boxer tool, or whether you're dealing with whether you're starting to develop and so on. So and although this was absolutely administered the way that the instructions were, so again, no fault of yours, to me, there was some consideration that should have been given that wasn't, because again, we're just learning more and more about making a better rubric out of it, and I frankly, I don't think that's fair. And I know if it happened to each of us 1 or 2 times, we needed 10 or 12 to move this thing up 12, I think it was. If that happened to each of us, 2 times, that's moving it 14. That would change a rating. So that's why I agree. I do think a rating is appropriate. And the third thing I would say is, as we look at our individual scores, of the 7 of those individual overall averages, 4 of them fall unaccomplished. 4 of them do. So even if we don't consider the boxes, even if we don't consider all the issues that we have within some of those other things that are all very, very valuable, even without that, 4 of them still fall unaccomplished. That's why I can support that motion made by Trustee Mayer, because I think if we don't do anything else and just look at what we have, that's where we land. And I do think it's important to be very fair. Certainly there are opportunities for growth. There's no question about that. And I think Superintendent Davis and her staff has identified some of those, and I appreciate that. And I think we need to, do what we can to support those growth opportunities and become a better district. But those are my 3 thoughts as we, try to bring this down to where do we land. Trustee Frankel.
Thank you, President Taylor, and I'm going to do my best to articulate. Haven't been feeling great anyway, but I'm tired as well. So I think for me, I was the one who advocated strongly early on in the year that I wasn't comfortable with this process to begin with, and we had done a lot of work in the past. But that aside, this is the process that we decided on. I sit on the Teacher and Leaders Council, and we struggle with the rubrics for teachers and principals evaluations all the time and get feedback from folks about the fairness and lack thereof. I went to a WEA meeting last week about that very thing and the use of SLOs and SLGs. I forget which one we call them here in the district. SLOs. I always switch those. And the frustration that some of the
define that for the public.
Student learning goals, objectives, student learning objectives. And the fact that they're now considered as a portion, 20% of their evaluation score. Next year it'll be 40%, and the impact that that's having on some of their overall evaluations. And some teachers that had been previously rated highly effective or distinguished are now being rated actually emerging or minimally effective as a result of the SLOs and the unique experiences of their students. And so they're frustrated, and yet that's going to be their evaluation rating. And so I understand that there's weaknesses in every process, and this is the process we chose to use. So I'm having a hard time, unless we do what Trustee Simon Holland suggested and not really look at a score whatsoever, I'm having a hard time kind of changing the process here at this point in midstream, because I don't know that anyone else who is being evaluated anywhere would have that opportunity to do that, even with the uniquenesses and the situations involved with whether or not their SLG was not necessarily, there were uniquenesses or exceptions or situations. And yes, they can try to have that conversation with their principals, but many of them aren't able to do that and aren't able to have their ratings changed. So I think part of what I'm struggling with is, again, my commitment to a process, but also having said all of that, I'm struggling with just getting hung up on a number and a label, because I'm passionate about performance management for its purpose, which is development and growth. And that's what I'm passionate about. It's not, we don't measure our students good or bad by the scores they make on a test. We identify what their strengths are and what their opportunities for growth are. And that's how I want to see this, and not get hung up on changing something because of the number or the label, but to say, what are the opportunities for growth? And I've appreciated the dialogue from Superintendent about that, and also the opportunity we're going to have to talk about goals going forward, which to me is the most important part of this dialogue. But I am uncomfortable ignoring the results of a process that we agreed upon and that we used. And as Trustee Kelly, unless folks want to change their scores, and I think, you know, if someone wants to do that, that's okay. Either that, or we don't look at the score at all and just decide we're going to accept the report without any label or score attached to it, or have those removed as in the final draft of the report. So I'm not comfortable kind of changing the process or making a different decision about it in terms of how we're going to label something or how we're going to score something. If we've got a score, we've got a report, I'm more comfortable just accepting the report as it was presented, because based on the work that you did compiling the input from us, based on the input that we received from many different sources of evidence. So I'm not as comfortable with supporting the motion for the reasons I just described.
Thank you, Trustee Frankel. Superintendent Davis, I see you.
It's interesting we're talking process, because if we go back to my initial comment, what I said was, when we started this process, we built the rubric and then we identified what I had to gather for evidence, right? So at that point in time, we built the rubric and we all agreed upon it, not the former board. So it's not like we said, here are the things you need to collect to be effective. I go all year and collect that evidence, and then we come back and we're saying, well, that's not exactly how it happened. Then we're saying we didn't follow the process. Whether you knew that process or not, that was the process I was under the interpretation of following. So if we start saying, well, this is the process, but really this is part of a larger process that wasn't followed for whatever reason, right? Change of board, we talked about that. That wasn't a blame. So then how do we send a message out? So I feel like if we're saying that the process failed, then the process failed altogether. We can't pick and choose which pieces failed, because many pieces failed. Hence a 3,000 document of evidence that I spent all year based on what we agreed to show you for effective.
Thank you, Superintendent Davis. Dr. Feemster?
Trustee Frankel, I heard you say that some teachers tried to get their evaluations or their levels changed from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, and you said none of them went up. Well, I could tell you I helped a few with that process, so that's not the case. Maybe it's with some people that you've worked with, but I know that some teachers have effectively argued with evidence that their scores should go up. So let's just put that out there. And I think if we did not fairly give the superintendent an opportunity midway to say, let's work on this or change this or add to that, which we were supposed to do. Again, if we did that with teachers, that would be a problem. Our president is sitting right there. You would be in our office. So I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I think we need to start we need to look at this fair. We're not doing it fairly, you guys. I'm telling you. We could have met with the superintendent at any given time. You guys have had meetings ongoingly. You've called them just spontaneously. Scott Kelly, I remember you complaining about some of the meetings we had, just arbitrarily, and I agreed with you, just arbitrarily, meet, and I understood it. We were here. You could have added one more to say, look, we need to meet and talk about some midpoints. Where are we? What's the benchmark? Where are we moving? How are we moving? That was never done unless I'm missing something. And again, we could not change horses in the middle of the stream on teachers. And am I correct? You have your president of the association agreeing with me. So an agreement, could you talk to me more about that 50% where we were going to meet with you, whether it was the other board or us, I don't remember, to talk about your goals midway?
I just think that for whatever reasons, we didn't follow the appropriate process outlined in the contract. The contract was clear about mid-course review, and I'm listening to all this conversation, and we just have a lot of work to do, right? There's a lot of work to be done because we're picking and choose what parts we use. Part of it says if I'm to receive a 1, I'm actually supposed to receive the documentation of why it's a 1. But we didn't address that, right? And if I'm receiving a 1, I'm supposed to give notice, part of the way the rubric is built, so that I can have a chance to improve. And if there's evidence that that was provided for me and I failed, then I failed. But if it wasn't provided for me, how is that fair?
If I could.
Yes.
I think,
Vice President Holland.
I think I absolutely appreciate the comments that are made, and I appreciated Trustee Feemster's, you could have scheduled a meeting. And the question is, who's the you that had the responsibility to do that? New trustees perhaps did not know that that was in her contract, and staff could have brought that forward and said, we're going to, have this meeting, or, could have brought it to me in the absence of the president. And so I think we all have responsibility that didn't happen. And I think, that's a valid concern. Again, the folks did their job and they collected the data that they collected. And whether or not the observations on each of the rubrics meets with what Superintendent Davis felt is represented by the evidence. It's a compilation. It's an aggregation of data. It's an aggregation of information. And of course, there were 3,000 pages of information, which, some of it says, yes, this absolutely was met, and others of it said, gosh, it wasn't as great as we wanted it to be. Like, student proficiency on standardized tests, it wasn't as great as we wanted it to be. And, there are those things that have happened that we would have wanted to be better. We didn't do as well on curing remediation rates at college as we wanted. We didn't do as well on improving performance on the ACT as we might have won. So it's not, for me, it's not cut and dried, and certainly it isn't for trustees based on the scores. And again, I am loath to reduce anybody's performance to a word and to a number. And again, I know this is not what the process intended, but I am much more comfortable, as Trustee Frankel said, having this give and take, which I think has been very healthy, and the discussion has been very healthy. And I absolutely appreciate Superintendent Davis's offers and suggestions of here's our opportunities for growth. Here's the things that we can do better. That's the purpose of the evaluation for me, is to have that dialogue, and I think we've done that. So I don't want this board to be divided by, or Superintendent Davis to be disadvantaged by a label that doesn't, who outside of Nevada and and even in Nevada, knows what emerging means versus something else. So that's my feeling about it, and I am not comfortable supporting the motion for those reasons.
Okay, I guarantee you a teacher would know the difference.
But that's not who she's going to.
But we should hear from HR about it. That's how I feel, because that's their area of expertise. And Dawn Huckabee should be here to explain why it's important to follow process, given the fact that she was never spoken to, that you might possibly get ones. But in the meantime, this is what you can do to move from a 1 to a 2 to a 3.
Yeah.
That's the way we do teachers. And if we don't do it, again, the union is on our backs.
Ms. Huckabee, I appreciate that. I don't think we need your response to that, because I think Superintendent Davis might address that.
Yeah, and I think this is where there's a gap when you have a transition in board. Debbie's absolutely right. What we agreed to is it was mirror what we did for teachers and administrators. Part of that mirroring is that you give an opportunity, and you know this is true. If someone's receiving a 1, they get ample notice, so they have time to get it. And I think the basis of that problem is the simple fact that that is part of the process. But it's unfortunate when everybody's not a part of the initial part of that process, and then they come on new. And I think you heard Trustee Molina say, hey, I was doing this, because what we hear is he's saying, we do believe there's areas where our superintendent is distinguished, but unfortunately, we won't be giving her credit for that, right? We hear the public saying, well, we've been talking about how great we were all year, but now we're going to say that she's not minimally effective. At the end of the day, we have to honor that there are many parts of the process that has been flawed to no fault of any individual, right? Part of its time, part of its transition. But the question is what we agreed to. It doesn't matter when you came on the board. That's what we agreed to when we started, right? That's what I agreed to, because for 6 months, I worked on collecting what we agreed to. And if that wasn't it, I should have been told in March based on the contract.
Let me put an end to this. I'm the president of the board, and if the board didn't do something the board should have done, it's my responsibility. Period. Trustee Mayor?
Yes, you want to know who you is? Me. And I call her constantly. I meet with her constantly, and I say, look, this doesn't fit well with me. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. What I say is she's gone to too many meetings. And I tell her, and she can make a mid-course change. And she has. She has. And I just feel that you got a superintendent here that's outstanding. That's, you've heard from these kids, from everybody. I don't know how you could put in good conscience anything less than accomplished. I just don't. When you look at her overall performance, she's down a 1 in some of these. In here, on Dimension 6, one of the trustees 2, all 1s. So she got a 1. Now, how in the world, if I were the guy that gave her 1s, I'd have an explanation, but I don't know how anybody under 6A, B, and C, Trustee 2 gave her all 1s. Trustee 1 gave her 2 1s and 1 4. I don't understand how you could say she's developing. It's just not right. I'm standing by my motion, and I'm going to call for a vote.
I was just going to say, speaking of your motion, there is a motion on the floor, and unless there's some differing discussion that we haven't had, why don't we move forward on the motion as it stands? Yes, I will do that. Just so everyone knows, Trustee Franco, she mentioned earlier that she had not been feeling well, and she's doing worse now, in fact, and someone's with her, and so really our thoughts and prayers are with her, because I know she would want to be a part of the vote if she could. I mean, she's not one to run out when the vote comes up. That's just not who she is. So we're going to have a vote at this time. But you have a comment,
I
Trustee?
just want to say something really quick. I think that is important.
It needs to be really important.
It's going to be real fast. I meet with all the trustees. We have one-on-one meetings. I actually document that. It's hard for me to address issues when I don't know who gave me a rating, because then I can look back and say, did I do what you asked me to do? Because we have those one-to-one meetings. So when you look at the overall global process, we need to have discussions about that, because if you ask me to do something and I'm not doing it, that's my fault, and I need to at least get back to you, right? Or you get back to me. But I think that's why there's a lot of issues around what we're all looking for, and Angie told me to stop.
Thank you. I'm gonna make sure I get the motion right. I believe the motion on the floor is that the Board of Trustees approves the draft superintendent's evaluation with the rating of accomplished, and that's consistent with NRS statute 241.031 and the current employment agreement. All those in favor of the the motion is that the Board of Trustees accepts the draft superintendent's evaluation for the 2016-17 school year, including a rating of accomplished, which is consistent with Nevada Revised Statute 241.031 and the current employment agreement. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposition? No. The motion carries 4-2. Okay, the motion carries four. What's the ooh for?
I didn't hear voices.
Four. Yeah.
I think you should do a roll.
Do you need a roll call?
Do you have it?
She has it?
Okay.
Yeah. How about you do law, and you let her do votes? No, she got it. Okay, the motion carries 4-2. Okay. All right. Now we're on to agenda item 2.02, and I will make this recommendation that Superintendent Davis shares with her the draft goals that she has, but we take it to another meeting so that we can have because everyone's tired now. We really need to have robust discussion about goals and how we move forward. But I know you've prepared that. I'll take some feedback from my colleagues if that's appropriate. She gave us it's a handout. Yeah, that's how. That's how I know she has it, because it's right here. And so, if you wouldn't mind, just again, colleagues, if anyone opposes to that, my recommendation, I'm certainly willing to hear that. I think yes, Vice President Holland.
It's not that I'm opposed. I want to offer that the strategic plan is the superintendent's goals, and so that's my 2 cents on that. So, and anything that would be mentioned as a goal, I would love to see measurable, quantifiable, time limited, so that it's very clear whether the goal was met or not, and that we would have regular updates on progress on those goals.
Okay, so why don't you take us through those, and again, we're gonna
No,
that way we have. Oh no, we're gonna have the discussion. We're gonna have her give us the goals.
I thought you wanted to defer it to another meeting.
Well, but she had them ready, so I thought that she wanted to talk us through them, and then we'll have the discussion there.
I think it's late. It's long.
Okay, you don't want to present them tonight?
We've been working long hours, flying across the country.
Okay.
I think we should look at them. I think they're up here. I mean, you all haven't. Yeah, well, I'm going to go over them real fast. Everyone has an opportunity, but I think that the strategic plan is the guiding document that gets us where we want to be. Trustee Simon has made a very good point. And when we start getting out of this, I'm looking at some of those goals and say, okay, what does expand mean to Melina versus what does expand mean to Katie? And then we get back in the same boat. So the guiding document, which we all believe will get us to a graduation rate and increase achievement across pre-K through 12, is a strategic plan. And so I am really leaning toward taking the subjectivity out, so we won't have to have conversations about, well, because we've all heard, well, I thought it was this, I thought it was this, I thought it was this. And so that was a great way to say this is what we'll look forward to, and I think that's a good idea.
So would you like to take us through these, or when you You said you wanted to, then you said, okay.
I heard that you all can read and it's late,
Okay,
and then you have a
that's fine.
copy.
Okay, so we will forego, or we just won't have a motion, any activity at all on agenda item 2.02. And then we will go now to, thank you, you guys are like, can we go? Yes. Yes, you may. Thank you.
I need to tell them what a great job they did. Everybody else got a chance.
Go right ahead.
You guys were wonderful. It was really a pleasant 2 hours that I stayed in that interrogation.
Well, that's nice to say anyway, Karen. It wasn't always a pleasure.
We got to the end.
Okay, so any more public comment? All right, then the meeting is adjourned.